I was giving it a bit more time. Last couple times I did this, it cut me off. So we're well late now. So hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the latest episode of the movie discussion Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film. This small dimension is only inhabited by yours truly, Cole and Jay, but you, the viewer, luckily get a window into it. So for October, finally, we teased for a while that we wanted to do a new series, maybe 4 or 5 movies coming up, and what we decided on was the fairly recent subgenre known as New French Extremity. I think a couple times I called it New French Extremism, but it's extremity. I don't know. Same difference, close enough. A genre that basically sort of emerged in the late 90s in France, and then for the next decade or so produced a number of sort of memorable movies. A lot of, as we said, for their shock value, maybe more than anything else. But what we want to do kind of with this series is examine that a little bit, see if some of the stuff goes beyond just shock value, and talk about maybe how they differ, how they're different from maybe a more classic kind of horror. It's not a movement that I was aware of really while it was going on. It was only a few years later that I probably heard the term. Now, again, there's no hard start or finish to this. You look it up, it looks like there's some movies even from the early 90s that could be part of it, and then there's movies as recently as like 1 or 2 years ago that could be part of it too. I know Gaspar Noé has done a few things in his movie that he did last year called Climax. Some people say that qualifies. I haven't gotten to see it yet. It was a movie that was actually playing at the film festival here that I couldn't see because of a conflict, but I heard it was pretty good. So yeah, as we often do in October, we try to do maybe some darker stuff or horror stuff. I know we did some different sort of thing last year. I remember we did Possession, and I think we did May. Just try to mix things up and do some more off the board type stuff, and that's basically the thinking that led to the New French Extremity. I know that Jay's actually seen quite a few of these movies. I've probably only seen a handful. I don't know. It's a good excuse for me too to see some of the ones that I haven't seen. So what we're starting with is 2002, so kind of right in the middle of Demonlover, which is definitely not one that I think leaps right to mind, or if you're talking to somebody that is familiar with the genre, to name some examples, they probably named quite a few before they got to Demonlover, and maybe it's not as strong as example. You could even say that it's more just kind of like a thriller with hints of New French Extremity. I don't know, but still, it's close enough. It qualifies. It's French. It has some fucked up stuff in it. I don't know,
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's kind of hard to find too. It's
yeah.
yeah, I looked all over the place before we were able to find a suitable copy.
But yeah, I have to say that I didn't know anything about it except for the title, which was really kind of what made me want to see it, even though it's not about demons or anything like that. So, kind of the main plot we have is kind of like corporate espionage is a big part of it, really, in that we've got people working for one corporation and interacting and having deals with other corporations, and then there's also the threat of various sabotage or industrial espionage from agents of other corporations. But then there's also one of these entities also kind of has like a dark secret at its heart that that everything rotates around in this movie, because it starts off fairly conventionally, I'd say. And the first hour, and we're going to talk about this a lot we're going to say the movie's confusing and kind of incoherent. The first hour really isn't. The first hour or so, you pretty much can follow the plot. You know what's going on. You understand what your character is doing. I mean, some things haven't been revealed to us yet. There's some reveals that have been held back, but it flows in a narrative way that we're used to. And then once you hit the hour mark, things start happening kind of haphazardly, and it feels like scenes have been left out, because suddenly you're watching scenes where you're like, how did we get to here? And there's no explanation, like why suddenly the characters are behaving in the way they are behaving. So it can get a bit frustrating. Jay and I both managed to watch the movie twice, and I like the movie, and I do like the movie, and I enjoy it. And I know that a lot of the confusion is kind of deliberate on the part of the filmmakers. So this movie from 2002, it was director named Olivier Assayas, or Assayas, who is mostly a film critic more so than director, although of course he's done some he's had a fairly long career as a director, but it's just kind of like something pops up here and there, and I don't know anything else that he's done. Although, yeah, he's been pretty, even in the last few years. He did Personal Shopper,
Yeah.
which I guess might be his most well-known film, which is a film I've heard for years. A lot of people saying, "Oh, it's a good movie. You should see it." And I guess I'll get around to it at some point. So I think Personal Shopper is probably his most well-known movie, and that's from just a couple of years ago. This 2016. Let's see. I think he won Best Director at the Cannes Film Festival. So yeah. So I guess I shouldn't say, oh, more of a film critic. I would just say that he started out as a critic. Okay, so obviously a fairly accomplished director, a lot of stuff on his resume, but this is the only thing I've seen of his so far, and his stuff seems to be all over the map for the kind of stuff he does. It's not like all new French Extremity, but this movie, as we said, maybe not a classic, perfect example of it, but it definitely checks some of the boxes.
Yeah, I was gonna say there was one of his films that kept being recommended in place of Demonlover because Demonlover wasn't available in anything.
Hmm.
I can't see which one it was. I want to say it starred Aja Argento.
Oh, okay.
Um,
She's
and
been a lot of stuff.
Yeah, as far as the French Extreme goes, it's I mean I don't really remember the term until like around the time High Tension came out,
Mm-hmm.
and then they
That's probably
actually
the first one I saw.
yeah, and then I don't even know if it was a thing until then, and they were just churning those things out, for a solid 5 or 6 years, out of France, and
Yeah.
I'd say maybe a handful were really good. And then you had guys, that did a lot of those films came over to the U.S. to make films, like the guy that did Inside did
Yeah.
the Hills Have Eyes remake, and he's done a few other things.
Yeah. I
Mirrors.
love the first Hills Have Eyes remake, and then the sequel is garbage.
I don't
Although
really
I'm
care
not sure
for
who.
either personally, but
I don't know. I really like the Hills Have
it's
Eyes remake. It's one of the few, and there was a million horror remakes in the 2000s. It's one of the few that I actually enjoy quite a bit. I've never been much of a fan of the original. I don't feel like very much happens in
no.
the original. It's kind of a problem. Like, I'm a big Wes Craven fan. We talked about Wes Craven in other places, and I really like him and praise him a lot. I feel like he doesn't get enough done in the Hills Have Eyes. It feels too thin. It feels like there should
Yeah.
have been more stuff in it.
It's not that I'm
And
mad they did a remake. I just don't really particularly enjoy it. I actually watched it maybe a month ago. I haven't seen it for quite a while, but
I've seen it a while, but I've seen it quite a few times because he used to come on TV a lot. And
mm,
no, it's one that I enjoyed, which was rare because there was, a whole wave in like the mid to late 2000s of horror, classic horror, basically horror from the 70s and 80s being remade, and I couldn't stand hardly any of them. And that was one that took me so by surprise that I liked.
it's one that I'm constantly like yelling at the screen because the characters do such stupid things. But I guess
That's
that's
true.
par for the course. But
No,
I'm just
I
gonna
understand that completely.
I'm gonna shoot my gun into the darkness because I'm scared.
Yeah, I'll just waste all my bullets.
Yeah, it's a lot of stupid things like that, but
Stuff like that, yeah, for sure.
typical horror tropes.
I still enjoy it, but yeah, it's funny. Like you, High Tension was the one that brought the genre or subgenre to my attention. And in a way, it's kind of vanilla compared to the others in that it's more or less kind of like a slasher, but with kind of a twist and a kind of a psychological edge to it, but not that different. And it's it's more straightforward than a lot of these movies. And that's why I don't think we would benefit from, say, trying to do an episode on it, because really, what is there to say about it? There's not really much to say. The movie was. I enjoy the movie despite the fact that it definitely has some kind of large plot holes that seem to be like a cheat with the audience. But it was also the fact that it was just so violent and brash with its gore, which is something that is a staple of these movies. And what's interesting about it is in most horror, and it's weird because it depends upon how it's done, whether it's a strength or not. Because most horror, we talk about the build up, and we talk about things like setting a certain atmosphere and foreshadowing, and all this stuff. Building, well, to use the term tension, building up tension. So that by the time like when the violence and things starts happening, you're kind of ready for it. I've noticed, at least I haven't seen too many of these movies, and a lot of them, they don't work that way in the new French extremism or extremity. It's just kind of like a movie will have a certain tone, and then just out of nowhere it will hit you with some really shocking violence. And I think this movie kind of works the same way. Not that the movie has a light tone to start, but it really just sort of feels kind of like, yeah, a corporate neo-noir sort of thriller. And it's not, and then when stuff gets messed up, it just sort of happens all at once. There isn't like a build up to it or any sort of real foreshadowing. And obviously that's done on purpose. And it makes the genre stand out and be interesting because, I mean, people talk about shock value. Well, it's shocking too because you're not really necessarily expecting it the way you would be if you're watching a more conventional horror movie or slasher. You're waiting for the grisly death or whatever. In this, you don't really see it coming, and then it just kind of happens, which is kind of cool. I like it. But yeah, with this movie, it still is a bit problematic just because of the way the narrative breaks down after a certain point. First hour, yeah, no problem. You can follow it scene to scene. You understand what the characters, or at least what's been revealed so far, are. There are some reveals in the second half that show, that some of these characters have hidden agendas that get revealed. And it's not like that it's nonsensical, but again, the way it's revealed it is so abrupt. And it's not the type of movie that's going to really explain things too much. It's just sort of here's the new information, now deal with it type thing. So it makes this movie kind of an uneven ride. But I still like things about it.
It's got a very arty feel to it, and normally I like that, but I feel like it's kind of using that to where is it really happening? Is it some sort of a manifestation of the video game or of the
Sure.
the 3D anime or whatever. So it kind of leaves you guessing as to what's real and what's not, which
Right.
I think is kind of it's kind of a cop out sometimes in movies.
Sometimes it is for sure. But it is the type of movie that if you wanted to take it literally, it does work, although it will still leave you with questions because it definitely seems to have almost deliberate, I don't even want to say plot holes because it's not, well, it depends on what you mean, because sometimes when you talk about plot holes, it just means like a really bad plot hole is when you get from point A to point B and you find out like point B doesn't really make sense because something was left out. But then you have plot holes where it's like you get from point A to point B and maybe it makes sense, but you're just not getting enough information to really put it together. And that's kind of what I feel like in this movie. Like, I don't think anything necessarily nonsensical happens in the second half, but it's still kind of baffling and confusing because you feel like there were scenes that were just deliberately left out in showing us how we got to that. It's like we're going from point A to point C and not showing point B.
Right.
Is kind of like they just make it's like a total turnaround in the second half because, as we said before that, the narrative structure was fairly conventional and normal. So I'm sure it's a deliberate choice. I don't know how well it pays off because it just kind of leaves you a bit confused. I don't know.
Well, like in the last act, I mean, she jumps around to quite a few places, and you don't really know how she gets there. She's just there, and it was kind of like I would turn away for a second and look back, and she'd be somewhere completely different.
Right, and how she's behaving, you're not really understanding why. So I'll try to just give the setup for the movie to help people out if they're not familiar, because the way it starts out is, okay, so we have our main character, Diane, who is some sort of executive or whatever at this company in France, and she's coming back on a trip with some of the people she works for, and like the person she works directly under, whoever that is, she reports to Karen. She basically drugs, without Karen knowing, drugs her so that when Karen gets to when they all split up at the airport to go home, Karen, is all drugged and starting to pass out, and two guys come and they kidnap her and they steal her stuff, including her briefcase, which has her important documents, and they throw her in the trunk of her car and leave her. And even though she doesn't wind up dying from it or anything like that, I guess because they're trying to make a point, because a lot of the movies a point to like show how like vicious the corporate world can be, they decide we don't have time for her to recover or anything like that. We'll just replace her. So they replace her with Diane. So at first it just seems, okay, Diane is kind of a vicious climber, willing to do whatever it takes to get to the top, and now she's replaced Karen in the hierarchy of the company. So in the bigger picture, the deal that's going on here is like they're going to go to Japan to help broker this deal with a company that makes hentai for the uninitiated. That's anime porn, and part of it, the appeal is too is this, it's interesting. This is 2002, so they're really just starting to get into the 3D type of stuff. Nowadays, if you're familiar with even kind of normal porn, probably you go to those sites, there's usually a category or something for like 3D porn. That's like you don't even have to look for it. Sometimes it's just there on stuff. You know, if you go to let's talk about our porn habits, but you know, like VPorn or Pornhub, there's often just some of those 3D type movies. So they become very commonplace now. 2002, they would have been a pretty new thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of. I wouldn't say it even looks bad. It just is bad compared to today's standards.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really a brand I care for too much. But
Right. So it's
I
part
prefer
of like why
the standard anime is what I'm into.
yeah. But anyway, so that's a little part of the plot. Is like they're already popular for their hentai, but it's also important that they're moving on to like this next phase in the evolution of using 3D. And so they're thinking, we have to get on the ground floor of this. And the idea is that this French company is going to help kind of serve as like a bridge or like a what's the word I'm looking for? Facilitator between the Japanese company that actually produces it and an American company that wants to distribute it. And that's really what the setup is. And Diane becomes more and more her role in this grows after she replaces Karen, and then there's a few other people like her boss is named Wolf. He's kind of like the head guy, and then there's also another guy in the company called Hervé that seems to be more or less her equal at this point. And then we've got her assistant when this starts, or at least actually it was Karen's original assistant, but when she replaces Karen, she takes over all of Karen's business portfolio and all her responsibilities. So she also gets the assistant, who is what is it, Elise? Is her name?
So.
Okay, played by Chloe Sevigny. And they make no secret right off that the two don't like each other, and they really resent each other. They're open about it, actually. Like
do you
they
see any
tell
reason why that is though? Like, it's not like she is really mean to her or anything. It just seems really odd. I don't know. I guess women are like that. I don't know.
Well, she does have one scene where she's really mean to her, but it's well after it's been established that they don't like each other. Because there is a part where, and it's really petty too. It's something like, remember, like, so like Diane comes into the office and I don't know, she's looking for a folder, it's some purple folder, and then she gets it, and then she goes after Elise. She's furious that she didn't bring it to her or something like that. She like snaps at her. She's like, "Don't like when I tell you to do something, you do it. Not maybe, not kind of, you do it," or something like that. And then she like lapses into English to yell back. Which I mean, I might as well do the digression here. So this is a French movie. Most of it is in French language, but of course there are scenes in Japan where they're dealing with the Japanese executives and companies where people are speaking Japanese. And as to be expected, kind of like in the real life, usually kind of as an intermediate between them, they'll speak English to each other. This isn't always the case. So you have a mix of French, English, and Japanese. And that's all fine. It works out for the most part. But then what's weird is you have certain characters that are not supposed to necessarily be French speakers that suddenly will go into French, and it seems like they don't have any trouble with the language. But the weirdest part to me is the fact that going back to that scene that I talked about where she's yelling at Elise, Elise snaps back at her, but she switches to English to do it. Suddenly she switches to English and says like, "Just back off, Diane. I'm not your slave, blah, blah, blah." And then they go back into French. I don't know if they're trying to suggest that Elise isn't a francophone, like she's a displaced American or Canadian that's just doesn't naturally speak French, but is speaking French because she's in France. But now that she's really mad, she lapses into her native language. I have no idea. And what's really weird is when you get right to that point, like I've brought up a few times, the first hour is fine, but you can tell exactly when it changes. Is they have a scene where suddenly it cuts to Diane driving around in a car in the rain. She's supposed to pick Elise up for some reason, and she's going to drive Elise somewhere. But then Elise says she has a message from Karen, pulls out a gun, holds it on her, and makes her do all this. That whole conversation is in English.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why. They just suddenly start speaking English to each other. Nothing prompts it, nothing explains it. Just suddenly, it's weird enough because you're already dealing with like you don't understand the behavior, like why, like, and it's really weird that like Karen eventually finds out, I guess, that Diane was responsible for her being drugged and losing her position. So her revenge on her is to have her former assistant pull a gun on Diane, make her drive to a parking garage, rev the engine, and then that's the end of it. She takes the gun and goes there. That's her.
Yeah, she pulls the trigger,
yeah.
but it's no,
Yeah, and I guess her message is like to scare But it was funny, and here's what's really weird is like how professional these people are, because it's been established these two characters hate each other. It is personal. So you'd think Elise would take some personal satisfaction in doing this to Diane. But as soon as that is over, she says the message is done. It's like all her animosity leaves her.
Right.
And then she picks her up, and then they just have another conversation like nothing happened.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. Really bizarre.
So there's a lot of... So this is what we're talking about for the second half. Because in the first half, the characters interact mostly in a way you expect them to, especially when they set the parameters. Like, I don't like her, she doesn't like me. So yeah, there's some tension and some bickering. But suddenly in the second half, their relationship gets all messed up and twisted and weird to a point where, I know I'm jumping ahead, but after the first time Diane, I guess, is tortured, I don't know, because this is they choose not to show you. So isn't this weird? Like, she demands that Elise take her to the place that I guess Demonlover's like partially behind. And she says, I agree to everything. So she agrees to be blindfolded. She agrees to be restrained and brought to the place. It cuts away and doesn't actually show her being tortured or anything like that. But obviously she goes through something. It cuts right back to her being unconscious and Elise sort of looking after her and taking care of her and like telling her Diane's handler from the other the road company that she was actually being a spy for. I know this is all very confusing. Yeah. Movie, telling her that you won't be hearing from her again.
Though, really,
yeah,
it might not help watching it.
But anyway, so then the next time they're in the office, suddenly there's no explanation, but the roles have been switched. Suddenly, Diane is her assistant, and she's not even resentful about it. She just seems to be calm and accepting of it. Because then you have a scene where Elise is very sharp and short with her, ordering her around, and she's very demure and just like says yes. Yes, Elise, yes. Mm-hmm. And there's a part where she's like, oh, Elise, like, I want to ask you. And she's like, yes. And she's like, never mind, you can go. Like, suddenly their positions have been flipped, and we don't understand why, and nothing tells you why.
Yeah, I guess we can get there later. But I wanted to touch on, Chloe Sevigny is an American actress. So, she probably obviously feels more comfortable speaking English. So in that scene where, she holds the gun to her, to Diane, I was just thinking maybe she was thinking the character was like her, and maybe, she's an English, an American person in France that maybe feels more comfortable speaking French.
That's all I could think about, because when she has that part where she yells back at her, she jumps into English, which that part makes sense. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, so she's normally an Anglophone who has to speak French all the time, but in this moment, and since she knows Diane is fluent in English anyway, she'll yell at her in English and then go back to French. But the scene where the movie turns, where they're driving the car together, there's nothing to set it up. They're just speaking English to each other, and you have no idea why or what's changed. Clearly something happened before that scene, but they don't tell us or show us.
Well, I mean, Elise is in control of that scene. Maybe she just wants to dictate what language we're going to speak right now.
Sure.
And she feels more comfortable speaking English. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
I was most confused by the American Elaine suddenly speaking English, because I thought, okay, this is typical. They're meeting with Americans. Most Americans are, monolinguists. They don't speak other languages, so they expect people to speak English for them. No problem for these French people because they speak English fluently. But there's suddenly a part where Elaine starts speaking French just fine. Now, there's a part earlier in the meeting where some of the guys that Elaine works with for Demonlover are there, and they speak French, but it's clear that they are Americans just trying to speak some French. Like, one guy goes, like, this is huge, just huge, and he's saying enorme, and his accent's all wrong and stuff. Yeah. But you know that it's an Anglophone making an effort to speak French to these people, and that's fine. But Elaine just seems to be fairly fluent, which was kind of baffling.
It has to be intentionally just a mismatch of languages, because, I mean, there's one point where, they're speaking English or speaking Japanese and French all at the same time, and when they're speaking Japanese, I don't get the subtitles on the version I had. I didn't know what they were saying in Japanese.
No, I didn't either.
So I don't know what was happening there. Maybe I missed something there. But
well, sometimes, when they met the Japanese company, they had that woman who was sort of their interpreter who spoke French for them, right? Basically. So I guess anything they were talking about, she would just communicate back. She makes out with Hervé at one point for no reason, and then it's never brought up again. Yeah. Because that's the other thing. We're getting to, that these are, like, this is a neo-noir, like, it's a very sexy world, and everybody, like, Hervé is just a man that gets what he wants all the time, and yet he doesn't get Diane. Like, he hits on her in Japan on the Tokyo trip, but, like, she kind of rebuffs him. But that's okay, because he's got, like, the other Japanese one making out with him at the club for no reason. But Hervé, it's funny, because this is one of those movies where everybody's kind of, despicable, right? But I kind of did like Hervé, because unlike the rest of them, he seemed fairly laid back. Everybody else is just so on edge all the time. But Hervé actually seemed a bit relaxed, which I kind of liked. But anyway, yeah, so this is, again, it's another one of those movies where it's making a point about, like, how cutthroat, the business world can be and the corporate ladder, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, they mix in the whole thing of corporate espionage. So to pull back this a little further, not only was Diane willing to poison Karen to take over her place just for her own advancement, it was actually because she was specifically a mole from the Demonlover's competitor. What was it? Mangaverse, I don't know, something like that. And so that's why she was doing it, because she was a spy for them. But then since you find out that it's clear that both Elise is revealed to be working for Hervé, and I guess it's indirectly suggested that Hervé works directly for Demonlover. It's a real quagmire of, like, whose interests and where they lay. It all gets mixed together. It's kind of hard to understand. Because basically
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, on the forefront of it, okay, as we said, we have got, like, sort of three entities. We have the Japanese entity, which produces the porn, which I guess doesn't really matter. They don't really have a dog in this fight. They just want their stuff distributed. And then I guess there's, like, various... What's that?
Volf? V-O-L-F?
No, Volf is the company that, like, the French company.
That's the distributor.
That sits in the middle. Yeah, Volf sits in the middle. Basically what it is there's the Japanese company that makes the hentai, and then there's the French company that works as the facilitator, and then you've got two different American distributors that are both in competition to get that hentai. The one we know that they're doing with is Demonlover, and the one that, like, they say is a competitor is Manga something. It's revealed that within the French company, we have somebody actually working for manga whatever, and that is Diane. Mangatronics, and that is Diane. But then it's revealed that also within the French company are people that seem to be working for Demonlover, and the whole thing about Demonlover is, like, they're even, like, darker than you think. So here's something I thought we could have some good discussion about, because as confusing in this movie is in a lot of ways, but when it comes to some of the content and some of the themes, it's actually very similar to a movie we did before on this show. Can you think of one? Videodrome. In fact, it's really similar. It's almost like the logical progression of Videodrome, because we talked about Videodrome, a movie from 1983, how it was really kind of ahead of its time, because it talked about how even then in the early 80s, the line between everyday life and what you see on the TV screen was getting blurred, and how, like, people were really getting invested in stuff they saw on the screen, and it was taking over their lives, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have this whole thing what kicks off the plot of that is you have your TV executive, James Woods, stumbling upon this sort of, like, hidden channel that, like, cuts right to the bone of sort of visual entertainment, which is just showing, torture on this channel, right? And then, there's all this stuff under it. This movie is almost like the next step of that, because now we've got the internet. So it's like, well, what's the next step up from a show like Videodrome? A thing like what's it called in Demonlover? The Hellfire Club, which obviously will always make people like me think of the X-Men, but the Hellfire Club. So yeah, so that's the other thing. So Demonlover is first supposed to just represent itself as an ordinary distributor of various porn, mostly Japanese stuff, hentai and stuff. And they talk about how that, like, they have their main Demonlover site. They have some other sites too that are derivatives of it and parts of it. But then in that meeting with the executives, somebody brings up the Hellfire Club, which is this really bizarre site that has, like, interactive torture porn, and they praise it and they say, yeah, it's a really great site, but oh no, we're not affiliated with that. No, not at all. But of course it turns out they are. But anyway, getting back to Videodrome, so this is like the next step up from Videodrome, because it's interactive, because the idea is you get on the site, although as you would think, it's not really that legal, so you have to jump through some hoops, you have to know proper codes and stuff to log on. Then once you log on, and I guess you pay a fee, because it's the internet, you pay for stuff, then you get to basically feed live instructions to the torturers to tell them what you want to see, how you want to see them torture these various women. So, yeah, so it's a lot up from Videodrome. which is something I really do find interesting, like about it. Except that I feel that Videodrome, as weird and fucked up as Videodrome gets, in some ways it's easier to understand than this movie.
Videodrome was almost before its time.
Oh, absolutely, it
That
was.
was like before people knew that was a thing. What S&M, BDSM or whatever, or BDSM. It's yeah, it's very very interesting, and I feel like there's been a lot of movies that have covered this topic, and I can't think of any right offhand, but
Yeah.
have the underground torture sites.
Yeah. So this is sort of like the desensitization the society has,
Mm-hmm.
How first on the surface it's just things like ordinary movies with violence, sort of vanilla porn, but then you get darker and deeper, and the next thing you know, you wind up in something like the Hellfire Club, and the idea is like I got all these executives sitting in a boardroom all dressed in their
Right.
suits, and they're like, yeah, it makes money, so what the fuck do we care, right?
Right.
Everybody in this has like almost no reaction to the stuff that's going on. I mean, not that they really should. It wouldn't make sense for them to say, I have a moral objection to this, because then why the hell would they be in the business? But it is kind of funny how they make a point that like nobody really has much reaction to this. And once again, I like Hervé because he's sort of like just upfront about it. Because at one point he's like, "Good sites, I like them." They're like, "Oh yeah, you check them out." And he's like, "Yes," and he's speaking English at this point. It's like Japanese porn is the best or something like that.
I think they go out of their way to point out that these people are all like degenerates. Like they all like really enjoy like freaky porn and stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's a few times that they're all just like watching porn on their own, just
Yeah, and it's more just like of a curiosity thing than necessarily getting off to it. It's just more like, yeah, I just want to check it out type thing. Because as we said, it's pretty funny. You have Diane paying for adult movies in the hotel room in Tokyo. Then she goes to see Hervé, and he's doing the exact same thing in his room.
Yeah.
And so this movie does have much stronger sexual content than the average movie. What's interesting is what actually happens in the movie, although there is a sex scene, is not that graphic.
It's not.
It's the stuff they see that's graphic. It's porn within the movie. So you will get to see some hentai, both 2D and 3D, but kind of like the typical, not all of them, as people know, or again, maybe you guys just aren't degenerates like myself, know that even though Japan is like a world leader in all sorts of like, freaky porn and stuff, they also have like a weird society and system that will often censor it and blur it out. So genitals get blurred out in a lot of Japanese porn. So basically anything we see in this movie, whether it's 2D or 3D or live action, we do see it, but it is pixelated. But even with the pixelation, it's still like more than you're expecting to see in a movie, because you're seeing like full penetration and stuff, which is quite different. This movie's maybe not as ahead of its time as something like Videodrome, but still in a way, I get the feeling in 2002, people probably knew that there was hentai, but I don't know if they really knew that much about it. Because it's funny, when they're talking about one of their classics, and they're talking about, like, this one's about, like, these two ninja sisters that fight evil forces with their sex magic, and then it shows them, like, getting, like, tentacle raped and stuff like that. Like, maybe that would have, like, shocked some people, but even in 2002, yeah, that's pretty standard, normal stuff. You can go find a ton of that.
I must have been on the front end of that. I was into that stuff before, like, the internet was around.
And what's funny again is like the tentacle stuff came because of the censors.
Yeah.
Because they were saying you can't show a penis go into a vagina, is what they said at first. So they were just like, we'll find other stuff to penetrate the vagina, and that's really where tentacle porn comes from. Whether it's demons or aliens or monsters, they're just like, okay, we'll just get around that. We don't need a penis. We'll just use something else. And nowadays, you don't even necessarily need it, but it became its whole thing, right? There's always going to be an audience for something. There's people out there that probably prefer tentacle porn, and no judgment here. That's fine.
It definitely has a way of, affecting your personal preferences and things. Because, if you had $80 and were wanting to see that stuff in the mid '90s, you're welcome to it.
Yeah. So so by 2002, this stuff was well established. But I have to think that there was probably at least a certain audience for this movie that didn't really know that much about it, that might have been a little shocked. But today, in 2019, I think even like people that aren't very internet savvy probably have at least heard stuff about Japanese porn. They'll joke about it in like fucking sitcoms and stuff, about how like there's hentai and stuff like that. Like it's become a much more known thing. But I think in 2002, it probably would have taken at least a few people by surprise. Like we said, the fact that they actually show it within the movie is different and leads to this it adds to this the credence of this movie actually being considered new French extremity. And I'd say, well, yeah, even though, again, the sex that we see in the movie that actually happens to the characters is not really that graphic. It's what they're watching, which is kind of an interesting layer, and again, reminds me of something like Videodrome, where there's, a big focus on the nature of voyeurism. And of course, this is all brought to another level with the idea of it becoming interactive over the internet, which makes for a really great final scene, but we won't jump to that just yet. But yeah, there's just so many balls in the air in the movie, and then all this stuff gets revealed, and it becomes so confusing because just the way the sequence of events they choose to show them, I don't understand it. Like, it's just a weird, deliberate choice.
Yeah.
Because, okay, so we follow the events of what happens at the airport and what happens, how she gets promoted. Then there's the Tokyo trip. The main things on the Tokyo trip is they find out that they have a competitor called Mangatronics, and they want to stop them. And you find out, what else do you find out? Again, at this point, Diane has replaced Karen, and what's her name? Elise is working under Diane, hates Diane's guts. But then when you go back to France, things really ramp up because the Americans representing Demonlover show up. They talk about the Hellfire Club. The people from Demonlover say they're not affiliated with the Hellfire Club, but we find out pretty quickly that they are. Then you find out that, like, Diane is actually a mole who works for Mangatronics that has been sent to infiltrate the French company to try to scuttle that deal so that Mangatronics can get that stuff instead of Demonlover. And then it's funny because at first, like, I guess it can't be too surprising because the first thing we see her do is drug her superior. Like, so clearly she's willing to go to great lengths, but then she actually breaks into the hotel room of the American executive, Elaine, to steal her stuff. Elaine comes back and they have a struggle, and it's quite the struggle. Like, I mean, yeah, if I was...
It really flipped the movie right there for me. I was like, okay, she's trying to murder her, and then I thought she got murdered by Elaine afterward.
Right. It's so crazy how the stakes just get up, because I think, okay, even if I was the type of person who is willing to engage in corporate espionage and willing to break into, like, somebody's hotel room to steal documents or whatever, and I know if I get caught, I could go to jail. I don't know if that necessarily means that if I run into her, there's going to be a fight to the death. But that's what these two immediately decide. There's just an unspoken, non-verbal agreement that's like, okay, I see you here, you see me. We're gonna have to fight to the death. That's pretty much what they both commit to, which is pretty crazy. Yeah. So then you have a struggle where at first she thinks that she's suffocated Elaine to death, but then it turns out that Elaine regains consciousness, comes up behind her, and hits her in the head like twice to knock her out. And here's where things start to get confusing. She wakes up still in the room, which would be weird. She's thinking, why aren't I in jail or somewhere? And also, all evidence of the struggle has been removed. Elaine's not there. Everything's been put back in place. It's just an empty hotel room that she's in, and she's allowed to leave. And then after that, that's when things go bonkers.
We don't see Elaine again after that, do we? That's all of Gina Gershon.
Yeah, we don't see Elaine again after that.
And she wasn't even in the movie very long. And, she was a pretty big actress at that time.
So I know the name, but I can't really tie her to anything.
You may know Bound.
Oh, yeah, I like Bound. Yeah, the Wachowski's first movie.
She's done a lot of stuff, but she did some more mainstream stuff, too. But I just thought it was so odd. Like, she had a pretty deep wound on her neck, so maybe she, like, bled out and died.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, because before the suffocating part, somebody got, like, partially stabbed. Yeah.
And their blood was all over the walls, and people were just walking by, like, okay, that's just like, that's how it goes around here.
Yeah. But I think it's immediately after that scene that the movie really turns, because isn't that where we just suddenly jump to her driving in the rain and picking up Elise?
Maybe it's
because that's where the movie really changes, because suddenly we have no idea why she's out driving in the rain, why she's picking up Elise, or why when she and Elise at first are talking just seem to be on normal terms with each other. Then things get really weird because she says she has a message for Karen, points the gun at her, makes her do all that. And as we said, after that whole thing ends and she says the message is just to scare you, they kind of like reset, almost like it didn't happen. which is really messed up. And then you get the whole thing about her, when I say her, so I should use names for clarity. Diane, remember, she agrees to be taken by the people that work for Demonlover. Why? Like, do you have any theory on why?
I mean, nothing other than maybe she's into it. I mean, you know.
It reminded me a bit of like in the movie we actually did this movie too. We did the movie shit. The Vanishing. How in The Vanishing, the main character, his motivation is curiosity more than things like that, right? He finally finds the guy that stole his wife or girlfriend or whatever, and he says to the guy, I don't want revenge on you. I don't want to hurt you or do anything to you. I don't even want to turn you over to the cops. I just want to know what happened to her. And the guy says, well, I will let you know if you agree to just let me do anything. And the guy says, I agree, and it leads to him being buried alive so that he can experience the same thing. All I can think is like she has that sort of weird, morbid curiosity where she's just like, yeah, I'm willing to whatever, just show it to me. And then we don't see anything. And then it just cuts back to a weird shot outside of a house of Elise, like, I guess it's her own house, which I think is really weird. Why is Elise's house? Elise seems to live in a gigantic mansion. Like, how much money has she been pulling in for her corporate espionage? Because there's a part where she's talking on the phone to her husband or boyfriend about, like, the babysitter coming or something like that. And then, I don't know. It's so messed up. It just becomes so scrambled and hard to follow. And as you said, if you look up on, like, something like Wikipedia to read, like, a plot summary, it's not going to help you because it doesn't actually talk about the scenes. It just sort of says stuff that happens, but it doesn't talk about the scenes. It doesn't mention how the scenes work or anything like that. So I don't know. So that won't help you. Maybe somewhere on the internet you can find a plot thing that actually goes scene by scene and tells you exactly how it happens, and it'll still just be confusing because you're like, how did this scene lead to this scene? Something's missing.
You said right there it seems to switch. It gets even more bizarre, like in the hotel when she gets knocked out by Elaine.
Right.
She gets hit in the head like 3 times, like really hard. Maybe it's like a Jacob's Ladder scenario or something after that, like
where she starts like
where it's
hallucinating
just
stuff,
it's
and
just
or she's inside, or she's already dead, and
yeah.
she's I mean, whenever there's like a head wound, and then somebody wakes up later, you can always make that leap. You can think, okay, maybe things aren't real from this point on, or things are really distorted. But it's not even that I think that the events are that weird. Like, I can get behind the idea that within Demonlover is this site that really actually does torture real people, and people on the internet pay to watch it and write stuff for it. And that they would have like people that would like kidnap people and stuff like that. Like, I can get behind all that. Like, it makes sense. The stuff that doesn't make sense to me is just normal progression stuff. Again, I feel like I don't understand why she and Elise suddenly the way they interact has changed so much. Like, there's no in between scene. Just suddenly they're acting really differently around each other with no explanation, and they're agreeing to embark on these things. Like she said, like, you agree? Yes, I agree. Here, blindfold me and handcuff me and take me to the place. Like, I agreed all this, and it's the same thing at the very end. Like when they check, because jumping to the end after the stuff with Hervé, the next scene after she kills Hervé, so okay, at one point she goes on a date with Hervé, like it seems like a date, and I think it's the worst part of the movie is their date because their dialogue is super annoying. It's just 6 minutes of them talking about nothing. It's just both of them talking about how, like, they have various armor and roles to play, and each was trying to figure the other out. We get it. You don't need to just keep blabbing about it and saying all this inane stuff to each other, but that's what they do. And then it's one of those weird things. We've seen this before. Like, we talked about it in the not the remake, but the original movie. Insomnia. There's a scene where our main character, the cop, is like with this woman at the hotel, and they're making out, and she's totally into it, and everything is consensual. But then he just out of nowhere gets super aggressive on her, and then she's like, and she stops him, and he leaves. The same kind of thing happens here with Hervé and her on the date. It seems like they start making out, and she's willing to have sex with him, and it's going to be fine. But he just suddenly gets super aggressive and like his stuff, so that it turns into a rape. And then what's really weird is, like, after and I guess they go to sleep at some point after that because she thinks she can't get away from him. Then she's just sort of waking up, and he decides to have sex with her again. And it's so confusing because now it's like, I thought it was just established that Hervé's one of those guys that like consensual sex doesn't do it for him. He has to like dominate and control. But now he's sort of having gentle, slow, passionate sex with her just as she's coming out of it. Maybe, but you could say, well, maybe it's because she's still compliant, right? Like she's not fighting, but she's not really into it either because she's not really fully conscious. Anyway, she's had this gun for a while that I don't know if it's the same gun she took from Elise or what, but now she's got a gun. So she takes it and blows his brains out. Fine. And she screams. And you're thinking, in most movies that would make sense, but it almost feels a little out of place for horror because most of this movie is people just like not reacting to things, you know, like nothing seems to faze them.
You did it, like you know what's going to happen.
Like I said, I think there are believable scenarios where a woman, you know, in stopping a guy from raping her, blows his head off and does scream because she's just so upset and overwhelmed by everything.
Right.
But I don't buy it for her character.
It doesn't
is
seem
my
like
thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like her character. And here's the other thing. Cut immediately to her and Elise checking into a hotel together. And then you just have, what is she even doing in her room? I remember it cuts, they're in separate rooms. It shows Elise playing a video game. What does it show her doing?
Oh, fuck, I don't remember. I know what you're talking about.
But they're just hanging out in separate rooms. But then at some point, they leave the hotel together and get on a fucking helicopter.
Yeah.
And the helicopter, and she seems to be going along with it, just going along with the whole thing. And then they give her drugs on the helicopter, which she seems to, again, take consensually. She walks a few feet off the helicopter, the drugs kick in, she collapses. Then she wakes up in one of the torture rooms for what are they called? The Hellfire Club, and she's in a weird latex suit, and it's like, okay. And again, I think that makes a certain sense. She crossed them, so they're going to do this to her. But I don't understand her compliance and cooperation throughout at all. And they don't ever try to explain why it's happening or how it's happening or why she and Elise are suddenly acting kind of like they're friends. And like Elise is like, okay, I'm going to help. Okay, we're going to check into this hotel, hang out, and then I'm going to take you to the crazy torture people, and they're going to make you one of their victims. Like,
she just likes to party, man.
Yeah.
She
just goes a lot.
And
then you get kind of a weird scene where she wakes up just before someone's going to come into the room and I guess rape her or torture her for her first broadcast. She actually manages to escape and physically overpowers and kills the guy that comes after her, which is damned impressive. But then she gets in a car and then more guys show up and they eventually run her off the road and she causes this car accident. The other person in the car accident, just a normal bystander, they immediately murder and then they bring her back, and it brings us to our final scene, which is kind of it's one of the few things you could sort of see coming. Although, like, the road to getting there was really weird.
Yeah, she escapes the Hellfire Club by throwing a television through the window, and she's wearing some sort of, like, I don't know. I mean, it works. It's really cool looking, but some sort of like latex bodysuit that's all like oddly colored, and she she's running, and obviously the man runs faster than her, and then she just completely overpowers this guy. I think she kicks him in the balls at first, is maybe how she
I mean, that helps.
And then
but
grabs
she fights him off very well and then smashes his head in with a rock.
Another head bashing scene, which, I mean, and then does he go off to have his own, scenario after that, after he's had his head bashed in?
I don't know. I assume she killed him, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's possible.
I assume she killed him too, but I assume she was killed the first time she got bashed in the head too.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a trick in movies. They always seem to. It's always like a oh, they're gonna come back,
mm-hmm.
whenever something like that happens.
But everything that happens right up to the point where she has her struggle with Elaine and Elaine knocks her on the head, everything there you can follow. Everything there makes a certain amount of sense, and you can follow the narrative makes sense. And then in the second half, I just don't know why they choose to do it the way they do it. Because you could just still follow the same narrative and reveal the things that get revealed. Like, I just don't understand these weird abrupt cuts, and suddenly, especially her scenes with Elise, they'll just, like, at least 3 times, they'll end a scene, and the next thing we know, without any explanation, she and Elise are doing something together. And it's like they're doing it together, like both of their own volition. It's not like Elise has a gun to her head and say, you have to do this, or Elise threatens her and says, I can, some sort of threat, like I can turn you into the police or turn you over to these people. It's just, they don't speak at all. they're together and they both have their agenda, and I don't understand it. And it happens at least twice. And then there's a weird date with Hervé in the middle, which doesn't seem to serve any purpose. Like, again, he seems more or less normal within the context of the movie. Like, all this fucked up stuff is happening, and then he reveals to her, yeah, like, Elise actually works for me. And it's clear that when he says works for me, like, I don't just work for this French company we work for, but I work for somebody else, and it's easy to assume that it is Demonlover. But I don't know. I just don't understand the narrative choices of this movie. It seems like they're missing scenes. Like, there should be some in-between scenes to explain why just out of nowhere she and Elise are like going on this car trip together, or why they're doing this or that together, and why they don't have any animosity towards each other anymore.
Well, you
So messed
remember
up.
when she was first kidnapped the first time? They put the bag on her head and like she gave her a cigarette. It almost seemed like Elise, like, I don't know, like attracted to her somehow or felt sorry for her, but that's when she like cleaned up the wound on her arm from the
Yeah, and even
IV
when
and
she's
all.
sleeping, she like lightly kisses her.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if maybe something switches there. Maybe they have, I mean, not necessarily sexual feelings, but maybe they're somewhat friends.
I
I
don't
don't
see
know.
how they could be friends. It just doesn't make any sense to me how they could be friends. I just feel like Elise,
I agree, but I
there
mean,
is sort of a sexual thing.
I'm
Is more, and part of it is like knowing that she can like control her and make her do stuff. Although again, I don't know why at first. Later, yes, because there's men there that can like drag her around. But there's parts where she's all alone with Elise, and it seems like Elise has power over her, and you have no idea why. And she doesn't seem to
I
be
know.
upset by it either. Anything to
Yeah, I know.
Elise like you'll pay for this or I'll get out of this. She just completely goes along with it, and that's how the
I'm
whole
just
second half
trying
of the
to
movie
figure
works.
out what's going on because it doesn't make sense to me either.
Because we see her
Um,
struggle twice. She struggles against being raped and actually kills Hervé. And then finally, when she's in the house, she struggles then. But other times, she's completely compliant and just does what they tell her to do and walks along. And the very first time, like you said, the first time where they seem to have tortured her or do something to her arm or something that is shown that isn't shown, that's off screen, it seems more like it's her idea. And that's why I brought up the whole thing about the vanishing, because it almost seemed like she just had this weird crazy curiosity where she's like, okay, I agree, just take me to the place and show me what it's all about, and then we don't even see it. So I don't know, very odd.
yeah, the whole I would say last like 25, 30 minutes are odd. It's yeah. It's almost like maybe they shot some scenes or maybe had some scenes they were going to shoot and ran out of money or something. I don't know. Maybe some of the film was messed up. I don't know. Maybe there's something that director's commentary could fill in the blanks for us.
Yeah, I'm trying to find something here. There's a thing on it on Roger Ebert's website from September 2003. I'm
Oh
just going to
wow,
take a quick look
not
here.
him though. He would never watch trash like this.
Oh yeah, I know.
He's too highfalutin.
I skipped the beginning where he says, my description makes the movie sound like a sleazy bottom feeder, but this is an ambitious production by director blah blah. The movie is set in the chilly, hot world of high glass offices, international hotels, and private jets. That's true. Yeah, it's all about that kind of stuff. But yeah, as it says, yeah, Karen. Until this point, the movie has had the look and feel of your average corporate thriller. Michael Douglas could turn up at any moment. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, takes its sudden drop into depravity. What's also let's move on to the logic of the story. Yeah, would it be cost effective to torture people online? How would you advertise this site and bill for it? How much would it cost? Who would be reckless enough to pay? An international corporation would obviously be wiser to sell soft porn instead of this illegal material with the tiny audience. That's true too. That's something I never even thought of because I thought, the movie's already in the realm of the absurd. I'm not going to try to apply that kind of logic to it because it harkens back almost to something that James Woods said when he was first talking about Videodrome, where he's like, why have real torture? Like, it's too risky, and it's just cheaper and easier to like fake it and have actors. And the answer to that, more or less, is just like, well, we're not trying to make profit here. This is like about some sort of fucking sadism or statement or bullshit stuff about reality and stuff. In this, we're never really given an answer. And we get it's a very memorable scene. It's ending, and again, it's hitting hard home the message about how we become desensitized to all this stuff through media, where we jump to the suburban, we jump to some neighborhood in suburban America where some like everyday teen takes his dad's credit card, goes into his room to work on his homework, uses his dad's credit card to pay for, I don't know, membership on the Hellfire Club site, and then he starts absentmindedly sort of typing in the stuff that he wants them to torture our main character Diane with while he does his like science homework, which I get is a very powerful message. And then you get a shot where her mask is taken off, and she's looking at the camera, and she knows there's some like sick bastard on the other end, you know, getting enjoyment out of it. And it's the same thing with the kid as all the others. He's not sitting there with his eyes glazed open. He's not masturbating furiously. He's just sort of half paying attention to it while he does homework. Which is kind of like the way the other people reacted, like when they're watching porn. You have him just like sitting on the bed, like, you know. So they really hammer that home at the end, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It is effective. It makes for a very memorable ending. But yeah, I don't harp too much about the logistics of it the way that Roger Ebert seems to be about. Like, can this be cost effective and stuff like fuck that. I don't think that matters.
Yeah, I've always wondered who these sickos are that just like randomly have porn going in the background, like other than like frat guys or something.
And don't worry, he does totally like hate the movie.
Oh,
There's an ironic twist if the movie hadn't paid for it, didn't deserve it. I was struck by the complete lack of morality in Demonlover. No one seems to question the fact that they all play to make money by torturing people. It's all just business. As a metaphor for certain tendencies in modern commerce, this may be intended, but somehow I don't think so. Why? I think Demonlover is so in love with its visuals and cockeyed plot that it forgets to think about the implications. And there's one of Roger Ebert's big hang-ups. He always thinks there's implications. He always thinks that movies... It's funny, for a guy that made his living like in the world of movies, you think he would have a better understanding than anybody that like movies, they don't make people do things. You know, he lived his whole life. That was his thing. He saw way more movies than most people. His whole livelihood was wrapped up in movies, and yet so you think he'd be on the side of like it's just a movie, and yet for him it's like the implications, like society. Like fuck off, Roger Ebert.
well, yeah, I think that you've got to combine like some sort of mental illness with that. But I mean, the average person, I mean, it's not going to change your morality. I mean, you know right from wrong, and seeing a movie is not
Yeah.
going to change that.
I'm just so tired of like the response to like a movie if it shows immoral things. The movie is immoral, and it's like it's some sort of like tacit endorsement by the filmmaker. It's like I made this because I approve of murder and rape. It's like no, you're telling a story. Obviously,
Right.
these are bad guys doing bad things. Like there even that thing about the shitty Joker movie that's out now. People are talking about how it might be like morally bankrupt or whatever. It's like it's celebrating a mass murderer. Like for the record, people, if you're wondering, I hated the movie. I thought it was terrible, but it had nothing to do with that. It wasn't like, oh, I hate this message in the movie. It reminds me a lot of I promise we're not gonna go into a thing about the Joker, but it reminds me of a lot of just a few years ago when they did the Ghostbusters movie. Because there was this big thing about people wanting to like get a message out of the movie and people politicizing it and blah blah blah. Where at the end of the day, no, it's just a shitty movie. And this is kind of how I feel about Joker. It's like, no, don't read into a bunch of stupid political bullshit. It's just a shitty movie. I don't know. It sort of seems to be a really polarizing movie. I've seen people that are like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. Okay, fine. I'm not going to. But people wondering, I know I'm the comic book person. I really, really hated Joker. I thought it was just garbage start to finish.
I haven't seen anyone say, "Oh, it was okay." It's always
it's either it was amazing or it was terrible.
Terrible. I mean, it's all over the board. Yeah. I mean,
I can't help it. I thought it was terrible. Like, just it was only 2 hours long. It felt like it was 4 hours. Like I just wanted it to end. It's just this long, joyless, lifeless slog. All the life has been sucked out of the characters. Gotham City has just basically turned into New York 1981. It's New York 1981 in everything but name. It even has the same movies playing at the same time. There's even a fucking garbage strike going on. Anyway, I promised I wouldn't go on and on, but yeah sure. Some people who know me are
totally apes Taxi Driver, right?
Yeah, it's basically the filmmaker was like, oh, okay, you know, like so he's like Death Wish, Taxi Driver, King of Comedy. That's going to be the backdrop for this movie. And it doesn't work. It's just so lifeless. Like, basically, Gotham is like this dead, completely dead city. Everything's dead. And the idea is that, like, as the movie goes, it's an origin story. You know, I'm not going to spoil anything by saying it's an origin story. It's how this guy becomes the Joker. And the idea is, as he becomes the Joker, the city goes through, like, an awakening. And, it's so lame. But I can't think of even a scene in the movie I thought was good. And it's weird how unfunny the Joker is. Because in like comics and a lot of the good things, is even though he's evil and doing bad shit, the Joker often does say and do funny things. He does nothing even close to funny. The movie goes out of its way to show you that this guy doesn't have any idea what funny is. Like they hammer it home. They're like, this guy sucks. He has no idea even what a normal joke with a punchline is. And that's not the Joker. But anyway, I don't want to turn this show into a thing about that. But yeah, I kind of get why it's polarizing. And it's a movie I really tried to be open-minded about. Like, I think the whole premise is ridiculous. I don't want an origin story for the Joker. I don't want him humanized. I don't want his aura and mystery taken away. And I really just tried to put that aside. And I thought, okay, just try to put that aside and think of it as just sort of a one-shot movie. It's not establishing a continuity. It's not canon. It's just a one-shot what-if type movie. And I still hated it. So I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I just feel like everything wrong was taken away from what the Joker is and injected into this movie. I don't blame the actor, Joaquin Phoenix. Everybody's praising his role. Fine, he puts a lot into it. He's obviously trying really hard, but I think it's flawed. The whole concept to me is flawed. But
yeah, I hope to see it.
Arthur Fleck, oh my god. It's this guy named Arthur Fleck who lives in a shitty apartment with his mother. That's the Joker, people. There's the Joker. Arthur Fleck, son of Penny Fleck. Brilliant. I will say, people have heard me shit on like Jack Nicholson's Joker. This makes Jack Nicholson's Joker look fucking brilliant. Because I mean, as much as I get annoyed by Jack Nicholson's performance, like still like a lot of the key stuff is there. He's a guy that delights in the theatricality and stuff of that, and I don't know. And like this movie is like it just all the life and color is just sucked out of it. It's so dismal. Like, anyway. I'm gonna shut up now, I swear.
Well, Pizzow saw it today and he loved it.
I knew he would. But I feel like Pizzow, I hate to say this, Pizzow, but you've been really compromised lately. All you want to do is like rage against like the PC society or whatever. And I know that you feel like this movie a lot of like PC types don't like, so you think this is great because it's upsetting them. Well, put that aside and think about the actual character and story and plot for a second and tell me it's a good movie. But
I haven't seen it yet, but they are trying to really make this movie a political movie for some reason. I don't know. They're trying to like compare numbers of men going to see it because it's misogynistic or something. I don't know.
I really didn't find it misogynistic. But I understand the political part because, like, a big part of the movie, like that awakening I was talking about, is basically sort of a class war. I'm not giving anything away, but the movie is sort of like talking about like a class war because a lot of it is sort of like how, like, people in Gotham are kind of trying to rise up against the elite. I mean, does that make this movie really that controversial? Lots of movies are about that kind of stuff.
It seems to me like I don't know if it was intentional, but it's good press for the film because. It's like we tried to do with Ghostbusters.
As I said, I think there's people like Pizzo that just get all swept up in it. They're like, oh, I love how this movie's pissing off like the PC people or whatever. Like, I love that. I'm sure he does like that, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just not a good movie. I mean, and to me, it's a travesty of the story of the Joker.
They predicted it to bomb, I think, and it actually did pretty well. I mean, I think set records for that weekend or whatever. But
I went to see it. More of a curiosity. I don't know. As I said, I mean, that's the only thing I want to get across. Like, as much as I dislike the movie, it's not like my dislike for the movie is not the same as some of these outraged reviews you're going to read on various online sites that talk about how the movie's depraved or how the movie has this message or this political stance or that. Like, none of that affected me, and I didn't care, and I didn't really see too much of it. I just thought it was just a very poor movie. A bad story, a bad world. It sucks all the mystery and aura out of the mythos. Like, all he did was take the Joker and neuter the shit out of him. Made him into a really pathetic, everyday character.
This ties in with Demonlover because, like I like, there's so many lists I follow of like the most fucked up, sick, twisted, demented movies. And I'm trying to watch them all because I like that shit. But
yeah, me too.
In reality, I'm like a pretty vanilla guy. Like, I don't, I'm never going to do that in real life. And that's like what you're saying about
that's why I'm so baffled that somebody like Ebert, who spent his whole life in movies, seemed to think that like movies like affected people that much. I was like, what? Did they affect you that much? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
movies
I mean,
affect.
if someone that would know would be the guy that watched a lot of movies, and
Yeah.
didn't he like write Caligula or something? He had
I
something
don't
to do
know.
with it.
Probably.
No, not Caligula. Whatever film he had something to do with. Probably.
Beyond he co-wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
I love that fucking movie. That's like a Russ Meyer movie full of tits.
Yeah, it's
That was like
weird.
the movie that, like, as a kid, convinced me like 1970 was like the coolest year that ever existed. I thought everything in that movie was like the height of cool. The big tits helped, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, how can you take that movie seriously? It's silly. So that's the other thing too. I don't think people should throw that against him because it's just a silly movie. But at the same time, yeah, it's weird. He seems kind of like a weird hypocrite in that, like, he doesn't seem to understand a movie's just a movie. Because yeah, here in his Demonlover thing, he's talking about, yeah, to think about the implications. Like, what implications? The movie to
Wasn't that one of the whole things they said about against the '80s horror movies? Was the implications too?
Well, sure, exactly, right.
Movies
They're
are
saying about it
trash.
corrupting the youth and all this stuff. That whole weird backlash they have, led by Tipper Gore and her fucking squad of moral guardians. Rock music and yeah, Friday the 13th. Like,
Stomp on their Public Enemy records or whatever it was.
yeah, exactly. I
Um,
know there's always going to be that crowd. It's just disappointing to see somebody like Roger Ebert, who lived in that world of movies, to not really understand the difference. Like, I don't get it.
I guess it's easier to point your fingers at that and say shitty parenting.
Sure.
It's like I was a shitty parent, so you know, I don't know, but I don't know. Like I eat that shit up. That's like all the stuff I like. Like all the stuff they were against is exactly what I like. Violent video games, violent movies, music that talks about violence.
Hmm.
But I'm not a violent guy.
Yeah,
if that
exactly.
if that counts for anything.
Exactly. I'm not a violent person either. As I said, some of my favorite like movies have like are like John Woo movies with cool, stylish gunplay, and I don't like guns in real life or anything. It doesn't make me want to go get one, and it also doesn't make me think that yeah, all that stuff is cool. Like it's a movie.
Right.
So, but and then then people bring up examples of people that are affected. It's like, again, well, these are people that like would be affected by kind of any kind of art because they have various psychological issues. Like they could probably they could go to the museum of like some of the greatest art in the world that everybody thinks is great, and that could maybe inspire them to do something violent or terrible. And plenty of that art really is. I mean, people don't really talk about it, but I think a lot of that Renaissance art, a lot of it is like really religious stuff, and a lot of stuff like Christ on the cross and stuff like that. So that's violent imagery, people. It's great art, but it's violent imagery. So
When she wakes up in the Hellfire Club, apparently there's a picture of Miss Peel from the Avengers.
yeah, I missed that. But yeah,
There,
it's a reference to the fact that that show actually had an episode called the Hellfire Club and something.
all over my head completely. So
Yeah. What's funny is like in the posters on the kid's walls in his room. I can't remember what most of them are, but one of them was a poster for the 1998 Godzilla. So this kid is like a fucked up individual.
yeah,
He's
you got
sick
to
and
keep an eye on
depraved.
him.
That obviously. Well, of course he's on this torture site. Look at the movies he likes.
It makes you wonder. I'm sure they did put some thought into it because it is this movie, but a normal movie would just be like grab some shit we have and put it on the wall.
Yeah. The score of this movie is pretty good. It's got like Sonic Youth doing like weird, their weird noise rock stuff, which really fits into a lot of the scenes, of course. What's weird though is like this is offset by there's several scenes of Diane just sort of walking around places with some really ethereal, peaceful style music, which seems really out of place. Like there's that part where she is wandering down the road. Like at one point in Tokyo, she just sort of like leaves her hotel room and just starts wandering the streets or something for some reason. And there's really peaceful music playing while she does that. I don't really understand why. So yeah, some of the stuff I criticize in the movie is it's not. I can't criticize it too much because maybe I'm just missing something because some of it's just confusing and I don't really understand what they were going for. as I said, I have to believe in the second half, the fact that the narrative just suddenly becomes so splintered and difficult to follow has to be on purpose, because the first half was fine. But I don't
Right.
really know what they're getting across except confusion. Like, I'm just left baffled over and over again. I know I've said it too many times already, but her interactions with Elise, the way they work, suddenly are just so weird. Like, I get what they're doing, where suddenly they've kind of switched places. It's like, I don't know, after she gets tortured, suddenly she's subservient. Sure. But then it goes to another level. I don't know. It's just weird. Everything's just so abrupt. A scene will end, and you're like, okay, I understood what happened in that scene. Cut immediately to a scene that seems to have no connection to it, and also seems to have things that needed to be explained beforehand. Again, like their interactions. Like, why are they interacting with each other this way? Did something happen? Did they say something? Because if they did, we didn't see it. I don't know.
I just remembered something. You were talking about when Elise was playing the video game, which I'm not sure what video game that is.
No, yeah.
Definitely some Japanese game, but Diane is watching a corn video.
Oh, is that Corn?
I think it's corn, yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, no, one of the either Corn or one of those ripoffs that were, it's 2002. That stuff's still going pretty strong.
I think it was corn. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll go and check. But
Yeah, well, they looked and sounded a lot like them if they weren't them. As we said, there was a lot of that going on. I thought I found another review of it, but it seems to be a completely different movie. Oh no, this is right. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's too short though. Yeah, that just jumps around too much. I can't get anything out of that. I was hoping there was something in a review that I could like build on or expand on, but that's no good. Too short. Yeah, there's not enough information about this movie. I mean, I get on a certain extent, like this movie is not really going to be a big hit or anything. Although it says on the Wikipedia page that in the last few years it's become a cult classic, which is weird because I'd never really heard much about it. Really, the main reason I wanted to do it was because of how little I've heard of it, and all I really knew was the title. Because I thought, okay, we're going to do some new French Extremity stuff. And I was like, looking at some titles, I was like, Demonlover, I don't know what that is, which is kind of how we got here. It was more, not knowing.
it has a tomato meter rating of 51% for what that's worth. Audience
I have no idea.
only 41%.
Because just the other day, the Wikipedia also has a page of movies that have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And man, it's weird. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Like, you know how sometimes you look up, like, lists of, like, the greatest movies and stuff like that? Like, you kind of get it. Even if you don't agree with all of them, you usually sort of get it. Rotten Tomatoes is the most random thing I've ever seen. And it also has, like, crazy recency bias. Because it starts with movies as far back as 1920, and it goes all the way up, and there's, various classics that are pointed out. But once you get up to, like, 2014, there's so many movies. Like 2014, 2015, 2016, they'll have, like, 20 movies each. And a lot of them I've never even heard of. So the recency bias on Rotten Tomatoes is ridiculous. Which I don't know what that means. Or maybe it's just, again, like a sort of a level of contempt for older movies that seems to happen from the more casual fans.
Here's a rating from Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian. Flatulent, conceited, and very, very confusing.
I don't know about conceited. It's definitely confusing.
It's borderline conceited, but yeah.
I don't think it's being really smug in anything it's telling. Like, I think it's being pretty honest with these characters. And yeah, it's a bit over the top, but it's not too over the top. Well, I mean, once it gets into what it gets into. But I just mean, it's hard to say what I mean.
I think the word I would sum it up is unsatisfying, because it seems like there's a good story there, but
yes,
they just didn't seem to get it. It left me wanting more.
Yeah. And really, as we talked about, the fact that it seemed to have some echoes of Videodrome made me really interested, but it just can't deliver. Now, I don't expect it to be as good as Videodrome. I think Videodrome is a very rare, like, it's a good, like, there's lots of good movies, but I think Videodrome is sort of, like, good in a really unique kind of way. Like, there's not a lot of movies that are good the way Videodrome is, and that it's so original, and it's so daring, and it's so memorable. And I know this movie couldn't really live up to that, but I guess I was hoping it would a little bit. Demonlover does have, like, a really good, crazy Blu-ray release on Arrow.
Yeah, I saw that. It
It's
has
pretty
the,
cool.
I think it has the unrated and the rated. Which that's the only place I could find it in the U.S. is there's an out of print. There's the DVD. There's just the R rated, and then there's another one with the R rated and the unrated
Hmm.
cut.
See, this is a movie I don't want to own or anything, but it does have audio commentary by Olivier Assayas, and I'd love to
Oh,
hear that.
see, yeah, that,
I would love because he's the writer too. He's the writer and director, so I would really like to hear him talking about the movie because yeah, it's a movie that's confusing, and as you said, I don't expect him to like explain it step by step, but I'm sure he could provide some insight into the movie. You know, it's one of those movies where I feel like as time goes by, I might start to appreciate it a little more when I have more time to think about it. Because there's definitely good stuff in there. It's got good visuals. The actors all really buy into the world that they're in, which I think is good. We were talking beforehand about Chloe Sevigny, how this just seems to be her wheelhouse if you look at like her resume, because she's just full of like movies that are like full of like uncomfortable, upsetting content. That seems to be her niche.
yeah. I mean, look at the director she works with. You know, Lars von Troyer and Harmony Korine.
Yeah.
But I wanted to mention Connie Nielsen plays Diane. I don't think we've talked about her yet, but she's someone that I know that actress is, but I've never seen her with like short dark hair. She always plays like a buxom blonde.
Oh, really?
Like she was in Devil's
Again,
Advocate.
she's probably in stuff I've seen, but I just don't know the
Like,
name. And I'm
you've seen Devil's Advocate, right?
a long time ago. I don't
Well,
really remember it.
you would. Well, she's in Gladiator, Mission to Mars, 1 Hour Photo,
Guess. Yeah.
Nymphomaniac. I mean, you've seen a lot of the stuff she's been in. You would. She's in the new Wonder Woman coming up too.
Oh, that's cool.
But
I think that Wonder Woman is set in 1984.
yeah, it is. That's the name of it.
Oh, yeah. I saw a poster for it walking out. I'm
And
trying to
funny
think, what
enough,
the hell did I see previews for when I went to see Joker? I saw a preview for The Lighthouse, which is a movie I missed being able to see early for the film festival. You got to see it, didn't you?
no, you know what's fucked up? I didn't check into that. I don't know how that got in my list. I saw
Oh, okay.
that and I'm like, did I watch that and forget? But no, I don't even have access to watch that anywhere.
Yeah. So
No,
that's
I
coming
did.
out sometime soon, but I was annoyed because yeah, it played back in September at the film festival here, and I didn't. I tried to buy a ticket, and it was sold out like 4 days beforehand. But I'm trying to think what else I saw a preview for because it
It's
was weird too. Because the preview I saw, I'd never seen a preview before. It had French subtitles for some reason, and it was presented. I guess it must. All I can think is it must have been a special preview that they put together for the Cannes Film
for
Festival.
the okay.
Because
Well,
it had French subtitles and like everything was like it was all in French, and I didn't know why. So I figured it must have been like a special one they put together for the festival. I don't know, kind of added a certain layer to the movie. But I'm obviously really interested in that movie. There was something else. I saw a preview for something else that looked pretty good. Oh yeah, the new movie by that Korean guy. Oh, that Korean guy that's done a bunch of movies the last few years.
Bong.
Um, yeah, I think so. It's called Parasite. That looks good.
Oh, cool. Sounds
And what's
good.
cool about it is like it doesn't actually give things away like most previews. What's weird is like the first half of the preview makes it seem like it's kind of a comedy, and then it just turns. But it turns in such a way that like everything's so vague that you don't really know what's happening or going on. And speaking of like Joker's thing about class war, this whole movie, yeah, the whole point of it just seems to be about tension between the various classes. But it looks really good. Yeah, so that's a preview I could actually recommend because I don't think it gives anything away. So if you can find that preview, it's for Parasite. That looks really cool. So since I saw a preview for it, that must suggest that it's getting a release somewhere
Mm-hmm.
around where I am. So I'm very interested in that. But it looks really cool. Just seems to be about somebody that like makes up some stuff on their resume so they can like be a tutor or something for the kids in like this weird rich family. But then I think they find out like the family has like really dark secrets or something like that. But anyway, it looked really good.
Well, let me ask you this: like in Nova Scotia, they don't normally play things in French, right? It's normally all strictly English.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that wasn't just like a Canadian thing.
No, like I said, I think they must have done it for the They must have done it for the. It must have been specifically for the festival it was shown at. Because yeah, I mean, we get the same previews exactly the same as you do, exactly the same. But this, I think, this must have been one that was done up for a festival. Because yeah, it was because it was like yeah, like those parts on the black screen where it talks to the audience that was in French and everything was subtitled in French. So I figured it was
It's an
something
English
specifically
language
for a
film,
French.
right?
Oh
It's
yeah,
English language. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. The subtitles for French, but I'm pretty sure when I go to see the movie, it will not be subtitled in any language. It'll just be as it is. It must have just been a special preview put together for the festival. Is all I can think. But it looks pretty cool, as I'd expect it to be. Willem Dafoe. Oh man.
That's one of the
And that's a
reasons.
great preview too, because again, all it really conveys is like something weird is going on here, but it doesn't give anything away.
Exactly. That's how you do it. That's why I mean I like to watch trailers, I really do, but I can't because it ruins movies for me. I like to be surprised. I like to. I mean, I don't really watch comedy anymore, but if I do, I want to not hear all the good jokes in the preview.
And that's how it always works. Like if the movie has like 3 or 4
That's
strong
it.
jokes, they're
You've
all
heard
in
them.
the preview.
Like,
When you
this
go to the
is.
movie and you find out all the stuff that wasn't in the preview, it's just garbage.
Oh,
Just like
you've
I
got
see
these.
why they put.
You've got these idiots just waiting for the line to drop. Like, yeah, there it is. I heard it in the preview. But
That's a really weird approach to movies, but you're right. There's people like that.
I mean, it's like now I try to time it to where I get there right as the movie starts, to where so I don't have to see any, only because I don't want them to ruin anything for me. But when we went and saw It Chapter 2, I saw like all the previews, and I mean,
Yeah, me too.
I don't need to see any of those movies.
Like Black Christmas.
Our,
Like I didn't care about Black Christmas anyway, but seeing the preview, I was like, if I cared, now it's ruined. Because they just like they give everything away. Like it's very easy to figure out what's going on in the movie based on the way they show the previews. Like, okay, I know who the killer is and why they're doing the killing. Thanks.
It makes no sense to me, but that's what they do. But you got to feel like maybe it's the stupidity of the movie-going public that
for sure.
makes it that way.
Well, yeah, let's actually show some of the kills to you. Yeah, that's a great idea. So that I know exactly. Like again, when we're watching a slasher, we know when a person walks into like an isolated place, they're gonna get killed.
Yeah.
It's not like it's gonna surprise us, but still, don't show how it happens. Otherwise, what the hell is the point?
That's a perfect example of just a cash grab.
The funniest thing about like how like so many slashers nowadays and stuff and horror movies are full of jump scares, but they don't actually show the jump scare or fake jump scares. You know, the fake ones where it's like, oh, it was a cat or something like that, or it was my Uncle Lou. Like they don't put that in the preview. So that's the only thing that surprises you when you watch the movie. All the real kills you saw, but you're like, oh, I got faked out by the fake jump scare because they didn't put that in the preview.
Yeah, I watched Dead Silence the other night with my kids. I was trying to find something that they haven't seen before that they may like, and they liked it a lot.
Yeah, I really want to see that again.
It's early on in James Wan's career. I think it's right after Saw. I think is like sophomore film, but
yep,
it's
like 2006.
It's a really well-made movie, and he doesn't, like later on in some of the ghost movies, like he utilizes a lot of the jump scare stuff. He does a lot of fake out jump scare stuff, which there's only a few times when he actually uses it, but yeah, it's a lot of fake out stuff. But
yeah, I really like Dead Silence. I mean, people know, I'm that's actually what I'm most scared of. I'm scared of those goddamn things. So the movie does scare me. But I mean, I'm able to watch it, and I would like to see it again because it's been a few years. But I've always enjoyed that movie. I think it deserves a sequel, honestly.
I know. I was surprised they never made a sequel, but
I mean, in a world where like there are so many goddamn sequels to things like I've never even heard of, and then I find out, yeah, there's actually like 5 of those. Like Jesus, like this is a fairly well-known movie that I thought was pretty good, and no interest in a sequel at all.
I think he had a few duds right around there. He had that death sentence right around there.
I've heard of it.
Kevin Bacon, which is a really good film too. Like early, or maybe not early, but mid 2000s. Let's see what else he did, and then he finally did Insidious, and I think really got back into the swing of things, and just has been doing a lot of those type films ever since.
Insidious is pretty good. I don't care for the sequels. I mean,
Not
it's
as
kind of it's kind of a paint by numbers one, but it's one I still kind of enjoy. Like,
I'm not as keen on it
there's
as
really
as
nothing original about it at all,
no.
but still has something I like. But its sequels are crap. Well, I think there's 3 sequels. Is there a 3rd sequel?
Yes,
Yeah.
something about the lost key or something.
Yeah. So I didn't see that. I saw 2 and 3. So there's actually a 4th called something, but I didn't see the 4th. I
Maybe the
think.
fourth is the key one. I think
Yeah.
I've seen them all. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm sure there'll be another Conjuring. There'll be another Nun. There'll be another, the La Llorona. That's in the Conjuring universe.
I tried watching The Nun and I
No,
turned it off. I was
the
so
Nuns. I think I think La Llorona may be a little bit worse than the Nun, but definitely they're at the bottom of the barrel of those
Actually, I
movies.
thought The Conjuring 2 was better than The Conjuring 1. Not everybody thinks that, but I did. Like, I thought The Conjuring was pretty good, and I thought the other one was better. I didn't think either of them was anything special.
Yeah,
But yeah, I actually have quite a bit of affection for the second one.
yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It kind of gives you a twist there. You think it's over, and it's not.
Yeah.
Which I like that. And that's all based on true stuff too.
Yeah. Isn't it hilarious? I mean, I only saw it the one time in theater, but I remember it pretty well. Like, when the end credits roll, it shows, like, the picture of the actual people. Did you see that?
Oh, at the end, yeah.
Yeah. Because it really, like, is a perfect example of the Hollywood phenomenon. Because, like, they're such homely people in the actual people, and then, they're all prettied up for the movie. Even the kids, I hate to say, even the kids are, like, ugly looking kids. But then they show them, like, juxtaposed against, like, the actors that played them. Like, okay, this is a movie. Let's pretty it up here.
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah, yeah. I don't want to piss off any of our British viewers that we might potentially have, so I won't
There's lots
mention
of
anything.
attractive British people.
There are, but
This is just a really unattractive family.
no, yeah. We've been watching a lot of the X Factor lately. Man, some of those older episodes of that show, they're you can always tell when it's like the American Simon Cowell show or the British Simon Cowell show, because at least the Americans, like, I mean, at least they have like teeth.
Well, I can't talk about anyone's teeth. I don't have teeth. I just do a good job of hiding them. Hiding what's left of them. But it's true, maybe Demonlover was kind of a flawed choice on my part, because while it has the new French Extremity, it leans more into, like, another kind of weird little subgenre. It's kind of like a postmodern noir story, but, like, mixed in with, like, kind of those, like, cyber thrillers. So it's kind of like a mixture of, like, 3 or 4 subgenres, which makes it quite unique. But I don't know. I do like it, and it does make some larger statements. Something like, the how it's globalization, how that can be sort of problematic in a way. Like, not like, I don't think the movie's anti-globalization, but it just sort of shows how things can slip through the cracks when you're dealing with things this big. I think it makes sort of that kind of point. The movie has this. It's funny. Like, sometimes I'll criticize a movie for feeling, like, soulless. And this, I think, it's completely on point that this movie feels kind of soulless. Like, they're kind of trying to show, like, these people are kind of like soulless type individuals working in, like, sort of a soulless industry, producing sort of a soulless kind of entertainment for a soulless public. Like, I think that actually all works really well and feels really and works really well. And even though the narrative is kind of annoying, as you said, once you get to the second part, I really do appreciate the settings and stuff, as I said in, like, the Ebert review, how we jump. It really shows sort of the corporate world of, like, fancy restaurants and hotel suites and private jets and glossy office buildings and all this stuff. But there's even just, like, more public spaces, like, airports and normal restaurants, shopping malls, escalators, hospitals, alleyways. Like, I mean, there's a lot of that going on, but I don't know. Everything seems to make its mark in a way. I don't know. It's just sort of like this weird collage almost of the weird corporate business world, which I have to admit is some. I can't relate to this movie on any level. Like even if you take that out, like I don't know anything about office politics, man. I don't know anything. I just don't. I only know what I see in movies and TV, and it's always made out to be horrible. It's just a bunch of sociopaths stabbing each other in the back and kissing up to bosses that treat them like shit because they know they can. Like, man, it's awful. Like, oh man, what was I just watching? Oh yeah, so last night, just before I went to bed, there was that movie. It was like a big deal at the time because she was really breaking out as a star. Amy, the Amy Schumer. Amy Schumer's movie. What's it called? God damn it.
The Barbie one or the
No, like her first one. The one with like she dates Bill Hader. Trainwreck.
Yeah.
So it's called Trainwreck, and it introduces her to her, and like a big part of her character is like, oh, she's kind of slutty, right? Like she's not interested in normal relationships. She just wants to like hit him and quit him. Fine, I don't care about that. But the other part of her character, which is something they show in a lot of movies, is like she works for like this sort of like high-end snobbish kind of like New York magazine, and like all their stories are terrible. But anyway, her like main boss, like her editor, is like this super mean British woman, and like the whole introduction is like this British woman just just saying really harsh and insulting things to Schumer and the other underlings, and like it's not commented on because the whole thing is she's the boss and she can just treat people however she wants. So yeah, I mean, I worked for newspapers. I guess it's kind of close to a magazine, but at least the editors I worked for were decent people. But in this, it's just like it's not even commented on. There's not like a scene of Amy talking to other people saying like, "Man, our boss is a bitch" or "She's harsh." It's just like it just goes without saying that our boss is a bitch, and we just take it because she is, and she can treat people badly. And that's kind of like what gets hammered home in all these movies, and I just hate it so much. Like, man, like even today in 2019, like you can just treat people like garbage if you're above them in like in the what's the word I'm looking for, the hierarchy of like an office. Like we always talk about treating each other with dignity and respect, but I guess it just goes out the window because the usual thing is like you only have one like option. You could quit, but if you quit, it's really hard to get another job, and if you do get another job, you might get an even worse boss. You know, it's just it's so defeating to think about.
It's all like the Devil Wears Prada ripoff stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm getting more and more that that's kind of realistic. I don't know.
I was thinking the same thing the other day when I was watching Dead Silence because Donnie Wahlberg's in there like constantly cracking jokes, and like the second his wife dies, like they're in there like talking about the autopsy, like making jokes, and it's like, do you know they don't do that shit in real life? Fucking murder is nothing to be joking about, man. Like, like, oh man, I bet you had a tough night or whatever. Like I forget the wisecracks, but it's constant, and I get that it's a movie, but that's a big time thing they do in movies.
Well, I don't know. Isn't that sometimes like what people like work in funeral homes and morgues? Because I mean, they are kind of desensitized to it. Like they just see dead bodies every single day.
Really?
Like
Though?
when's the last time? Like when's the last time you saw a dead body? Like maybe a funeral.
A funeral.
Like you don't see it.
Yeah.
Like, but you don't see dead bodies outside that context really. But these people do. They just get brought in over and over again. Here's another dead body. Here's another. So I mean, I think it's. I mean, I'm not saying it's excusable, but I do think it's something that happens plenty in real life. I think there are plenty of people that just get used to that kind of stuff. Like, there's another corpse. There's another corpse.
The detective investigating the murder.
Yeah, I think so because I mean, honestly, like, what city do you live in where the murder rate is like just like people get? I guess it'd be like Gotham in the comics, right? Like just like dozens of people like murdered every day, and some by like spectacular circumstances, not just like his ex-wife shot him.
God, I forget the comment, but like his wife had basically been turned into like a doll, mutilated and stuff.
Mm.
And, it just makes some, it's just really. I don't know. If people are doing that shit in real life, go for it. But it seems like if you actually care about your job, you may not want to do stuff like that.
But in this movie, like I said, I like how everybody just sort of buys into this world, cold, soulless sort of world that they're all in. And I really do like the visuals of the movie. That does remind me a lot of Cronenberg. There's a lot of soft focus and stuff where you get close-ups of characters and stuff like that. The backgrounds are usually blurred, which creates a certain kind of focus on there. There'll be some long lens stuff, compositions. Yeah, camera's usually in close. It's one of those things like certain movies, they're all about like framing a scene and giving you the details of the environment where they are. This is kind of like shutting that out, like until maybe it pulls back later, because usually most scenes have characters and environments, but we don't get a good look at the environment really. It's really close in on the characters. Like I said, often background stuff gets blurred. It's kind of has a neat sort of frenetic pace to it, which I think again sort of matches the urgency and stuff. The business like these characters, they're striding confidently from one place to the other. They're not in here to enjoy things or take things in. It's business, business, business. So I mean, the director definitely has a good understanding of sort of how the camera can work to fit the tone, I guess is what I'm saying. So I like that very much. And again, it does remind me a bit uh, of Cronenberg, because back when we were doing Cronenberg films, one thing we talked about was like one thing Cronenberg really liked doing was having like sort of bland, sterile, cold environments, right? Like he really liked a city, like the way they showed the city in Videodrome, and usually inside you had like like offices and hallways and pristine white walls. Yeah, it's the type of movie that fits that. Like Cronenberg's not the type of guy that is going to like have like a movie that shows off the beauty of nature, for instance. Cronenberg's not going to show us a sunset or a waterfall or a mountain range. He's going to show us like a parking lot or a subway platform or a doctor's office. And this movie kind of reminds me of that. Although it's glitzed up a bit, because it's glitzed up again the world we were talking about of all the money and privilege that these people enjoy. I don't know. The world's a weird place in a way. When you think about how much training it takes to do certain jobs, and then you think like how little you have to do to get some of these positions, and these people make so much fucking money, and it goes to their heads too. Like, do you think that anybody, like, even taking out, like, we'll take out the more fantastical elements of this film? Does anybody in this movie strike you as particularly talented or even hardworking? No, they're just ordinary bozos that happen to be in a good position, and they make a ton of money, and it fills their head. They think they're indispensable. They think they're really talented. There's even a scene where, okay, right after the meeting with the people from Demonlover, the person from the French company that's been assigned to them is Elise. Elise has been assigned to them, and they're talking to Elise, saying how impressed they are by uh, Diane. They're like, do you know any way we could recruit her or something? I think we need somebody like her on her side. Why? What the fuck does Diane do or say that's so good or impressive? Nothing. It's like, wow, you really handled yourself in that meeting. Meetings aren't hard. Like, I don't know. We built up this whole weird worship of like this kind of business. I'm not saying, oh, everything about business is easy, because I don't live in that world, but I just mean this stuff I'm seeing. What's so hard about it? I don't know. What made Diane so talented? The stuff that made Diane talented was when she was willing to break the law. That's what made her unique and special. She was willing to do corporate espionage and sabotage and assault and kidnapping. Not like
murder as well.
yeah, not her everyday stuff. It's like, wow, Dan, you did a great job on those reports.
Have them on my desk Monday morning.
Yeah, wouldn't you? I'd love to see like a parody of this, like the Office Space. You know, except
I mean,
all the murder and intrigue is still there, but it's just like dulled by the edge of like all that boring office stuff from that stuff. Like, really gonna need that on my desk by Friday.
she does kind of brush off almost getting shot in the head like pretty easily. She's like straight back to work.
Well, that's what they really try to show about these. Again, how they are. They're just so dedicated to what they're doing. Like nothing affects them. Like whether it's violence or sex or whatever, it's all business to them, and they're all just all about being professional and doing the job. It all just washes over them. It's really what's getting across with these characters.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention about Connie Nielsen was she was actually married to Lars Ulrich for quite a little while.
Huh. I had no idea about that.
Yeah. Also,
That sounds like a turbulent time.
also from Denmark.
Oh yeah, I mean he was born in the States, wasn't he? But his like parents are Danish.
Oh, I'm
I
not
think
sure
his dad.
about
I think his
locals.
dad has like an accent.
Yeah, he was born in the States, wasn't he? Or maybe he was born and then came over quick
Yeah,
soon
well, yeah,
after.
he definitely grew up in the States. Like,
Yeah.
but I think his dad has like an accent and stuff. I think I saw a thing like that. It's pretty funny too. I've talked about this before. It reminds me of like what it's like to be like super talented to the point where people just expect it from you. Like they're not even impressed. Like, I mean, I'm mildly talented about at some things in my life, writing or some of the stuff, music and stuff like that. But I wasn't anything special, and yet my parents always played it up like I was so great because that's kind of what parents do. I remember this thing. There was like a documentary. It was showing like I think it was showing in the studio like Metallica while they were making the Black album. It was like a documentary about that. And there's a part where like Lars is supposed to be like lying down a drum track, and they're all outside the booth, but his father is like right there, frowning with his arms crossed, like just like so unimpressed and not at all caring that his son is like one of the greatest like rock drummers in the world, and actually like criticizing him and critiquing him when he thinks he makes a mistake. Like, wow. Like, I mean, in a way, I guess maybe that kind of helped drive him to be good, and that's how he got where he was. But I don't know if I could have handled being under a parent like that. Like, okay, so you're a professional musician and you sold millions of records and stuff like that, but I don't care. Like, I think you're out of your tempo's off. Like, he just looks so like annoyed. He's just like crossing his arms, frowning, looking at it like that was
Isn't
terrible,
that like a lot
Lars.
of that? A lot of that stuff, Tiger Woods' dad or something.
Yeah, I mean, again, you sort of get why they got because they have parents that were like perfectionists.
Yeah.
Is it really worth it in the end? Like you got to be super talented, but maybe it was at the expense of some of your childhood and maybe some of like having a warm relationship with your parent. Or instead of being like a parent, they're just more sort of like a drill instructor. I don't know. Maybe he has a really great relationship with his father. I'm not trying to take one thing and take it out of context, but I'm just saying within the context of that, it was kind of hilarious and sad at the same time because he just looked so like not disgusted, but like just so unimpressed. Like he did not. I don't know. Like he didn't care that they were in the studio to record an album and they were like this, worldwide success band that had sold millions of records. All it was like, here's my son and he's fucking up again. I don't know. He just looked so, I don't know, sour. But whatever. As I said, that's just one thing, and maybe I'm taking it out of context and reading too much into it, but it really did make me feel that. There's a little bit of David Lynch kind of in this movie too. There's some things about it that remind me a bit of like Lost Highway, maybe. Although that's more of just of a feeling. It's not something I can
Yeah.
really articulate too well. Like I can't really come up with like a solid example from the movie, but it did give me kind of that feeling in some scenes.
It may could have used some of that, like shots going down the highway to get us from one place to another.
Absolutely. This movie, its abrupt cut from scene to scene maybe probably was a deliberate choice, but I kind of disagree with it because it just makes for confusion. I don't know. I get wanting to make a movie that doesn't necessarily follow all the narrative standards and rules and maybe has the audience a little bit off balance. I'm all for that, but I don't know. I don't feel like it added anything to the movie. I feel like it, like you said, there's a pretty good story in there, but it kind of suffers when you get to a point where parts of it just seem baffling and out of place. Or maybe you can piece together how they are in place, but you feel like you shouldn't have to piece it together. You feel like the movie should have just naturally progressed there, but I don't know.
Right. Well, that seems to be most of the criticisms of the film is that exact stuff, and I get it.
Too disjointed.
It's kind of my problem with it too. But
Yeah, just
I
too
guess
disjointed.
in the art house style, I guess it's accepted, and
Hmm.
maybe it's a stylistic choice.
And I like it in some movies,
Yeah, I do
but
too.
I do feel like it hurts this movie. I feel like the movie has enough other good things going for it that it doesn't need like an extra layer because I like the performances by the actors. I think they're good. I think they all buy into this world and sort of what their characters are like and how they fit into the world and how they react to things. I really like the visual style. I like the way the camera moves and focuses. I like how it's has like a focus kind of on impersonal environments and stuff. Again, that reminds me of Cronenberg. I think that's all really good, and it has sort of this jagged, impersonal, almost soulless feel, which once again I think is really to the movie's benefit because of the content and the story it's telling. So it has a lot of things going for it. And I do kind of enjoy the way it does peel back the layer, because at first it seems like it's about one thing, and then you find out it goes a bit deeper. You see that in a lot of movies, right? It starts out one way, and then they peel back some layers and they show there's some more stuff going on. This movie does a pretty good job of that to a point, but I can't give it full marks for that, because once you get into those reveals in the second half, the delivery becomes scattered and confusing. So this is a movie that I feel like I could have really liked, but it just has a few problems that keep me from being able to do it. But as far as like calling it like a neo-noir, postmodern noir, cyber thing, like it's a great example of that, I guess, but it's a kind of a very small small section.
I don't know if it necessarily falls into the category we're talking about here either, because I thought they were really, uh, gory and really categorized by their, violence and stuff, um, and dark, really. Um, this feels, yeah, definitely like a neo noir type film versus some of that other like really grimy,
Yeah. It's more on the edge kind of being a new
yeah.
French extremity movie. Like it but it doesn't dive all the way in. And again, I'm not going to criticize it for that, and I think it's still fair. It still fits. It's a French movie. It's still edgy. It's still dark. It still has some fairly shocking content. It just isn't fully in that world. It has a toe in a few other things too, but it's stuff I like. It's kind of has some of that slick neo noir thriller style that I enjoy, and I'll always appreciate the parallels to Videodrome. It can't live up to Videodrome, but I still appreciate some of the similarities, and in some ways, it is kind of like a spiritual successor to Videodrome, although again, not on the level of quality that Videodrome is. But I still found enough to like about the movie. I still like the movie overall, but I feel like you. I feel like there's just some things that needed to be corrected, or some things that are missing that keep it from being like a truly really great film, and leaves you a bit disappointed. It's more like I like. It's weird. You talk about like all style, no substance, or something like that. I feel like this has style and substance. There's actually just something in between missing. Something in the delivery is kind of missing. Is kind of how I feel. I like the style. I like the substance, but uh, there's some sort of thing in between them that's not getting across. It's like lost in translation. It's like the delivery is off. I don't know. But I still do like the movie, and I do want to check out a few other movies by this director unrelated. And of course, I've always heard that a lot of people say Personal Shopper's pretty good. But yeah, when this movie gets into the second half and starts sort of deliberately screwing with the narrative, it's I don't know. I bet you there are people that really like that, but I kind of feel the same way you do. I don't like how they did it, because it just left me a little too confused about why characters were making certain choices, or why they were behaving the way they were with other characters. It just felt like stuff was left out. It feels like stuff was missing. It feels like we jumped from one scene to another, but there should have been an in between scene that would have made more sense, and it's missing. As far as the content that goes in here, it's funny because I mean I don't know a lot about the new French Extremity, but one of the things that's in it besides graphic violence is graphic sex and some of the depravity. But this is kind of like more of a sterilized version, because it's more about people having like this weird detached attitude about it.
Yeah.
Whereas I know when it comes to some of these other movies, like it's really intense, the sexual stuff. You'll have like a really intense sexual relationship, or you'll have like a really intense sexual fetish. And you'd think this movie would be like that, considering it has like torture porn in it. But yeah, there's just some sort of clinical detached attitude towards it. that again is really hammered home in that final scene with the kid just sort of half watching it while he does his homework, and how the other characters sort of barely react to the stuff that they see, whether it's just ordinary porn or whether it's some of the torture stuff. They just are desensitized to it. Again, I know that's sort of the point the movie's making, but I think as we get in, probably at least on one or two of the other movies that we do for this series, it'll delve more into that on kind of more of a personal level. I think. There's a few of those ones that have like people that get like obsessed with each other, or one gets obsessed with another, and they get all wrapped up in each other. Like this movie's not that, but it still does have some of that content that makes it at least qualify as like partially new French Extremity. Maybe not the greatest example, but I'm still glad I got to see it. It does have a lot of stuff I like. We're still deciding what the next week's show is going to be. I mean, it'll be something within the new French Extremity. I know we ruled out a few because they're more well-known. As we said, there's not very much we could talk about when it comes to high tension. It's more straightforward. I know maybe some people be interested in seeing Martyrs discussed. And I'm a fan of Martyrs, but I don't know. I don't feel like we need to go there. I'd rather break new ground for myself and see some stuff I hadn't seen. So we haven't really decided on that yet. There's a few titles that we're at least thinking about. I know there's like, what is it, like In My Skin or something, Trouble Every Day. There's a few like that where those are ones that are under consideration. But we have not actually come up with a decision on that.
Yeah, I know we had a few we were looking into. We really were trying to get this show together so quickly. We really haven't had time to even discuss it.
Sure. And we'll be able to talk about the genre a little more in depth as we go. As we said, this movie is more like dipping a toe into it than really being a great example of it. So we'll have more things to say about the genre itself. But really the main thing, I think, as he said, is talk about whether or not how redeeming, if these movies really have that much redeeming qualities, or if they really just are all for shock, which is what the same argument people will make about a lot of horror movies. It's like, okay, it's all well and good watching people get killed or stalked or whatever, but is there anything there? For some, yes. Others, no. I like plenty of horror that really doesn't have any sort of redeeming value because it's just more kind of easy entertainment. But I think we both feel that there's horror out there that does sometimes go somewhere deeper and make more of a statement. So we're going to try sort of maybe that sort of same sort of approach when it comes to these movies, which sometimes even fall into what sometimes people would just refer to as a new wave of French horror. Although I would argue that it's a little more specific than just horror. So looking at some of these other names here. Them, I know, is a pretty good movie called Ills in French, of course, which I think is one of those like invasion type movies. I've seen Irreversible, which is a very cool movie. We might do it. I don't know, because I mean, that's a movie with like such a reputation that maybe people will be interested in seeing it. So I don't know, it's something to consider.
I'd be down for that.
Pretty much everything Gaspar Noé does qualifies.
He has some stuff that I'd like to see that I can't even find.
Yeah, I'd like to see the I Stand Alone.
That's the one.
Which is the one he did before Irreversible.
There's a film called Base Moi that's from 2000. That's a pretty good film. It's a rape revenge.
Right, yeah. Which is basically what Irreversible is too, but done in a sort of different way. But yeah, I'm looking at that one. I don't recognize any of the names or anything, but I've heard of it.
You know, on the page of the Wikipedia page for that is like Demonlover's pretty high up on the list. It's like right there. Like, you know, after it mentions some of the big ones you talked about, it mentions Demonlover.
I'm sure that's one of the reasons why I thought about doing it, because it was a name that popped up a few times in things I looked on, like on Wikipedia. And the title, really, I didn't know anything about the movie, but the title appealed to me, and I was like, yeah, it could be one to check out.
I didn't realize Hot Tension was so early in the 2000s. That's just a year after this film.
Mm-hmm. So I can't quite recall when I saw it. I probably saw it 2 or 3 years after. I didn't see it right when it was new, but it was newish when I saw it, because it had already had kind of a bit of a reputation of it being maybe something kind of different. It's not really that different, but it's still good. It's a good watch. I enjoy it. There's a Canadian one called The Pornographer that came out the same year as Trouble Every Day, 2001.
Yeah, there's a few French Canadian films that are in that list.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking it'd be interesting to do one of those.
Yeah, actually, really prevalent. Actually, Martyrs is one. Martyrs is one. Martyrs is a French.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah. And when I say French Canadian in this sense, I don't mean French Canadian like Quebecois. I mean a joint between France and Canadian production. Just to clarify that term. But yeah, the director that did The Hills Have Eyes, Alexandre Aja, his name comes up a lot, and he just had a horror movie come out called Crawl. I don't know if it was any good or not.
Oh, that was him. I'm definitely
I
gonna go
remember
watch it then.
I
Yeah.
remember seeing previews for it, and he did the Maniac remake, which isn't bad.
I didn't know he did that either. That's cool.
I really like Horns, but I like the
Horns.
book. But I like the book Horns too, so I kind of expected to like the movie because I already enjoyed the book. That's the Joe Hill book that I
Joe
like.
Hill.
It's just got like it's just got this sort of offbeat, quirky quality to it. And what's his name really does a good job of sort of displaying Daniel Radcliffe. Like he seems to really get it. So that's kind of a fun. It's kind of a fun one. I mean, it's not one of those movies, but it's by Alexandre Aja. Hills Have Eyes,
Yeah.
High Tension. Because I mean, obviously, after he did High Tension, he kind of moved away from that kind of stuff. I mean, yes, The Hills Have Eyes is a horror movie, but it's also just a remake of a well-known horror movie. Maniac, ditto. Horns is an adaptation of a novel. And yeah, got a few things that I don't really know anything about. But yeah, he just did Crawl, which also looks like a more conventional movie. Excuse me. What was that? But I think Gaspar Noé probably has the most considered that. Let's see if any of these directors are Canadian themselves. I don't think so. I think most of them are French directors. Of course, this is not a complete list. I'm looking at the list of Wikipedia, just looking at the directors now. And all of them appear to just be French. Although it's possible some of them might have some Canadian ties that I just don't know about. But yeah, well, that one you said, Base Moi, is actually directed by a woman, which is a little bit different. And what's different about her is like she actually used to be like a work in porn, like as an actress. Like she was a porn star or whatever you want to say. Like, I always object to star because it's like if they're not famous, but she was a pornographic actress. And she was actually in one of those like crossover things. Gaspar Noé's short film Sodomites, which is not actually porn, but seems kind of like a crossover between pornographic movie and a mainstream movie. She acted in that, and I think that kind of got her foot in the door to do writing and directing. So yeah, she's the one that did Base Moi. So she knows a thing or two about sex.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I want to
Yeah.
correct myself. I think I may have said Frontiers was Belgium, but it's actually a Calavar, which is a good film as well. Around the mid 2000s, they were really making quite a few of these films.
Yeah, that's really when it really picked up. So there's definitely probably be a couple from that era that we'll do.
Yeah, and if you guys have any favorites that we haven't mentioned here, let us know. We're always open to
Yep.
picks here because we're trying to get the rest of the month laid out.
Mm-hmm. As I said, I mean, it's not like I don't, and I really liked Martyrs, and I wouldn't mind doing an episode. I almost just feel like it's not that necessary. But if people really wanted to see it, I'd do it. because I mean I do like the movie, and if people wanted to hear a discussion on it, that's fine. But just for my own satisfaction, I'm also trying to look for some movies that I haven't seen that I'm not familiar with. But yeah, I remember reading about Frontiers. That's one with the neo-Nazis.
Yeah, I didn't realize Raw, the film, French Belgian from 2016, is considered a French extreme.
Yeah,
French
that sounds
extremism.
like one I couldn't watch. Stuff that gets into stuff about eating and stuff. Really, I'll watch whatever we got to watch, but it'll make me uncomfortable. I bet
It's
stuff like that.
it's
Cannibal
it's
stuff really makes me uncomfortable too.
it's not as prevalent as you might think. They really build up to it, and it's.
I've never understood. The only thing I can think of is because it's rare that cannibalism like doesn't like get viewed with like much disgust by our society. Like it's such a rare thing that like it's almost a punchline or a joke. And yet like it just seems like our society is so much more revolted by something like rape than cannibalism. I'm not saying rape is good or you should be like it or anything like that, but to me, cannibalism is much worse. And I feel like people just almost make jokes about it, like even when it really happened, people would like make jokes about like what's his name, the guy from Milwaukee, Dahmer. Like people make jokes about that shit. But if you made jokes about like some prolific rapist, people are like, "What the fuck? What's wrong with you?" Like, so yeah, cannibalism was one of those things where I feel like society doesn't seem to like have a good handle on it. And again, I think it's just because it's super rare and doesn't happen much. Whereas something like rape is really common and has touched a lot of people's lives. So it's like you can't joke about that. Like I knew somebody was raped and stuff. And I'm not saying, oh, I wish we could joke about rape. That's not what I'm saying. I just think it's one of those weird imbalances that we have, like as a culture again. Like for fuck's sake, in Germany, there's a professional hockey team called the Landshut Cannibals. That's what they're called. That's on their jersey. That they're cannibals, and nobody seems to care or mind. And yet again, if you tried to make a team called like the sex criminals or the rapists, people would not like that. Now I get you could say it's Germany and they're all pretty fucked up, and you probably wouldn't have a cannibals team over here. Well, I don't know. It could happen.
Well, they're taking away the Indian names or the Native American names, so got to replace them with something. We'll be
Something, yeah.
the Washington Cannibals.
There you go. But yeah, cannibalism has always made me super uncomfortable, which I think is a really normal thing, and yet it's not something people really talk about or care about. It's like, yeah, cannibalism. Like, I don't know. There's a cannibalism movie I love, a really great black comedy. I know you know what I'm talking about. Ravenous. I love Ravenous.
Oh, Ravenous. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movies. I just love that movie so much, and yet it still makes me because there's cannibalism in it. It's all about it.
Well, does eating your own flesh does that gross you out as much?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, well, In My Skin may be off the list then.
No, I mean I want to go through it.
Pretty much what it's all about.
I know, but it might be something. It might help me. I don't know because yeah, it will definitely make me feel really throughout. But I don't know. The whole point of these things, like I said, is try to get past the shock value and see if there's something else, tangible to take away from the movie. The movie has some value beyond shock, beyond just shocking. So I'd be willing to put that to the test with something that personally upsets me and grosses me out. So no, I'm not gonna cross that off the list. It's a possibility. It'll be a difficult watch for me, but it could be helpful. It could even be therapeutic.
This one called Glowing Eyes.
Right.
It looks interesting.
Oh,
This one
don't
called
know that
Glowing
one.
Eyes.
Okay, yeah, same year, 2002.
I just one
A favorite of John Waters. Well, we know John Waters is pretty fucked up. Yeah, all I've got is in a decrepit Parisian porn film theater, a 50-year-old man and a young projectionist begin a tentative relationship observed by the world-weary Italian-born cashier at the ticket booth. Well, that doesn't give much away. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia thing. Maybe you have something else that has a bit more info on there.
No, it's the same thing I'm looking at.
But yeah, in the next few days we'll try to do some research to find out a little bit more about some of these movies to see what ones might appeal to us to try to do, and then of course we have to see if we can actually find them. Some of these films are harder to find, but there's some sites out there that are helpful for that, so we'll see. But I don't know, unless there was like another topic you wanted to talk about, we don't have to drag this, we don't have to drag this one out or just repeat ourselves a million
No.
times. I'll just give final thoughts. I like this movie. It's not, as we said, it's not the greatest example of New French Extremity. It more is kind of skirts around the edge of it than jumping right into it. But it still qualifies. It still fits. I like the movie. I like the performances. I like the look and feel. But I feel like it's scattered delivery in the second half, which I'm sure was done for artistic purposes and was done on purpose. I feel like it was misguided, or at least it didn't work out maybe the way they wanted it to. I'm sure there's certain people that watched the movie and really liked it and said they liked how it made things off balance and weird, and I can't criticize that or argue that. That's fine. But in my case, and I think Jay's case too, we just sort of felt like it just made things confusing to a point where things were unsatisfying. But there's still a lot I did take away that I liked about the movie, particularly the stuff that reminded me of Videodrome and some of the stylistic choices and camera work, delivery, visuals, etc. So I do like the movie quite a bit. It's not one that, again, you would bring up too much when you're talking about New French Extremity, but it's a great example of sort of like a neo-noir, cyber thriller-esque movie, psychological stuff. So it's got all those elements and pulls them off pretty well. I'm not going to say it's like a classic or great or anything, but it's a good movie. It's unique. It combines a lot of sort of familiar things into like kind of a unique final mix, which is cool because it is hard to compare it to a lot of movies besides something maybe like Videodrome. Although, as pointed out in the Ebert thing, it does remind you of some of those more vanilla corporate thrillers, but then it gets into sort of like more fucked up, darker territory, which I can appreciate. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I pretty much just gonna echo the same thing you said. It, I wanted to like it more, but if that stuff was a stylistic choice, where it kind of split between like you could understand it and not understand it, as easily. Um, if that was a stylistic choice, I think I can get behind it a little more. I just don't know if that necessarily is the case, but you know,
It's hard for me to think that it would be that incompetent that suddenly the narrative just becomes kind of incomprehensible and incoherent. Again, we get generally what's going on, but just so many things seem to be missing and people acting in ways that are not explained. I don't know.
but yeah, like you said, I like the subject matter, and I feel like there's a good story to tell there. It just didn't do it for me. Probably won't be
Mm-hmm.
watching this one again, but if you guys want to, give it a shot, I definitely say do it because it does have a lot of positive qualities
Yeah.
that I hope we've, gotten across here.
I'll watch it again at some point. Probably because of the visuals, which I can appreciate, and some of the music too. We didn't get really into music, but
Yeah,
yeah, the Sonic Youth stuff is kind of par for the course, but it fits the tone of a movie like this. I was a little bit confused by some of the more peaceful music that shows up here and there, but I think they're just trying to create maybe a bit of a contrast. It's like, oh, here's a scene that seems fairly innocent, cut to a scene that gets kind of dark and fucked up. I mean, I think it's probably that simple.
yeah, I like it. It worked for me. Fine. I didn't have a problem
Yeah,
with the music. I thought it was fine.
yeah.
Um,
So because of the visual style and stuff like that, it's more that makes me interested in seeing some other movies by the director, because I think he does kind of have his own sort of style and his own sort of voice, which is what you want in any director. So it'll be interesting to see that applied to different sorts of films and see if I can find any sort of similarities or not. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the stuff that's clearly Cronenberg inspired, because I think it's pulled off pretty well. I mean, there's certainly other directors that have either tried to homage Cronenberg or just rip him off, and probably didn't do as good a job. But I think this does a pretty good job of invoking sort of a Cronenberg feel, but not just being a ripoff. But I don't know. I liked it.
yeah, yeah, I feel the same.
All right, so that'll do for now. That's Demonlover from 2002, our first dip of our toe into the pool that is New French Extremity. Maybe next one we'll plunge right in. It'll probably be one of the more extreme ones, just for the hell of it, because we might as well get this going as October goes. And as we've said, we have a few that we're considering, so we'll try to work that out. And if anybody watching has some opinions on that, feel free to share it with us, and we'll take that into consideration, because we want to do stuff that you're interested in. But yeah, we're hoping to do maybe 3 or 4 more of these, something like that, throughout October, because it's an interesting little subgenre that's while it was going on, I wasn't really aware of it. It wasn't until the last few years when the term came up, and then I was like, oh yeah, there were a whole bunch of movies like that. And I know that Jay saw quite a few more of them than I did, probably because you went through your phase of looking for like movies that are considered like disturbing and shocking a bit earlier than I did. I probably did that a few years after you did. I came to it a little later, but I'm sort of the same way. It's like, oh, this movie's
Yeah, I was
fucked
really
up
into
content.
that. That's once I figured found out about it, I was really into that. So I kind of seek those out.
Yeah, I know we're ending, and I don't want to drag it out, but I'll just say, like, in that quest, like a week or two ago, I found a movie. I think it was an Austrian movie. I don't think I've ever seen an Austrian movie before. It was an Austrian movie called Angst, although it also has some other titles. Sometimes it's called Fear, just about kind of like a serial killer, and I enjoyed that. It reminded me kind of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, in some ways.
Great film. Yeah, I saw it for the first time not too long ago.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it.
It's been on my list forever. It's like the guy that like commits some senseless crime, goes to prison for a long time, gets out, and basically just
Immediately goes to murder more people.
Yeah, he kills like the entire family, right?
And what's interesting about the movie is like it actually has him giving narration, so he's explaining kind of like some of his motivation for some of this, and of course he's like just batshit insane. And it's interesting how haphazard everything is. Like he just has no plans for like living or getting money or getting by. All he can think about is like sort of like the next murder, and he just sort of like falls ass backwards into these situations where he can murder more people and stuff. And also, a lot of the movie has him just dragging corpses around, and it's really actually kind of funny, even though of course it's very dark and people are getting killed. It's actually just sort of funny seeing him struggle with these bodies. And he's also just sort of an ordinary guy. There's nothing strong or dangerous about him. So his killing is really awkward and flailing, and sometimes he's really struggling with these people, even if they're supposed to be like weaker than him. And it's also kind of darkly funny. He is based on like a real killer, Austrian killer too, that did stuff like that. But yeah, I enjoyed that movie. So that's something that I just saw recently when I was jumping back on the bandwagon to check out some of these like fucked up type movies. So yeah, that's a fun movie. But so yeah, that'll do for now, and we'll come with you either next week or maybe we can fit another one into this week. I don't know. It's possible. We'll see what we can do about that. But because as we said, we're trying to get some done in October. So if that means squeezing 2 into the same week, maybe we can do that. Because I know our output over the summer and stuff has not been what we want it to be. Mm-hmm. In 2018, we got a lot done. 2019, we've been kind of not as productive for various reasons, So we're trying to pick up the pace a little bit here, heading into the end of 2019, do what we can. And as we said, we have at least a little bit plotted here, in that we have a series that we're going for, so that gives us a bit of an edge. So we'll see what we can get done within the next week or 2. So anyway, stay tuned for that. More new French Extremity coming up. So that's the Pocket Dimension for tonight. Anyway, I'm Cole, and that's Jay. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you pretty soon. Peace out. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.